How do you do, everyone? My name is and this is the Bloody Disgusting Network. The succeeding show will fill you with dread. Have a good time.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of oh.
Greetings, Bango Skanks. It's the Losers Club, a Stephen King podcast, and we are here to discuss The Dark Tower Part 5, Wolves of the Calla. This is our 5th Dark Tower episode, as you know, because you are a Dark Tower fan and you are listening to this. We have episodes on The Gunslinger, on Drawing of the Three, on The Wastelands, and on Wizard and Glass. Pfleegor, how many of these have you been on?
I've been on every single one, I think, so far.
You are the only one who has, which is appropriate since you have our Dark Tower Detour spin-off series, which there's going to be a new one later this month. So join
Mr. Caffrey and I are pumping them out. So
that's right.
Stay tuned.
Patreon.com/thebarons. Always a good time for a plug. Okay, we're talking about Wolves of the Calla. I'm really excited. I have one confession to make before we get started, though, and that's that I can't read this Come Kamala song without hearing "Come my lady, come my lady, you're my butterfly, sugar baby." So
well,
Crazy
now you've
Town.
gotten it. Now all of us,
you
are
ruined
gonna
it.
have that problem.
So I literally was
ruined
imagining Roland dancing to that song during his big dance scene. I think it blunted the impact somewhat of the power of that one. So let's go around and introduce ourselves and say, when did we first read this book? And Anna, is this your first time on our Dark Tower episode? I believe it is.
It is my first time on a Dark Tower episode.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, tell us about your relationship to the Dark Tower, when you started it, and Wolves of the Calla specifically. And also,
I was going to go with Marie Cox.
I was going to say, yeah, give us that's a good one. But you can also be crazy. You can be Crazy Town Cox.
Or Kazan.
Mm-hmm.
Kazan.
Yeah, that works.
So I read the entire Dark Tower series when I was about 6 months sober. That is my main memory of them, is I just was in a place of I needed to escape into a world, and there are so many books. It was this is just binge. It's like binging on a TV show that has 11 seasons, right?
Yeah. And they were all out by that point?
They were all out, and I didn't love them all. That's the weird thing, is that
they're all very different.
I like some of them. This is actually one of the ones that I like a lot. But what's also kind of a confession is I have a little bit of a hard time telling them apart in my head. This one's pretty distinct because it has the Callahan story that actually I really connected with. But if you put a Ruger to my head and and ask me to what all the other ones are about, except for the first one, I might have a little bit of trouble telling you. So
what about Wizard and Glass prequel?
I could not. It's funny when they talk about the events of it in this, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember reading that, but
yeah.
I don't remember it as that's the other thing about reading them all together, right? I don't remember it as an individual book.
Well, I'll say it's a 5-noser for me, and it was on our ep, so it's for a long time I said it was my favorite Stephen King book of all time was Wizard and Glass, so I'd recommend checking it out again.
All right.
Dan Pfleegor, co-host of the Dark Tower Detour on the Losers Club Patreon. We know your Dark Tower history, but tell us about Wolves of the Calla specifically, and also introduce yourself with a very cool nickname.
This is Dan Nazala Cola. I was also going to do Come my lady.
Kamala.
I would actually.
Is it like our vice president, or is it?
I kept thinking of our vice president.
It's like a shifty. I would actually say I'm probably the only one here who's seen Crazy Town live. I would wager.
At the height of their fame, or
it's at the starting to fall. They were at Ozfest 2001 and they got booed off stage.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was probably the down.
Yeah. But no, yes, this is, as I've mentioned in other episodes, Mr. Dan Caffrey got me into the Dark Tower. He gifted me, I think, for Christmas the Gunslinger, and then I just rapid fire went right through them. So I would probably guess this was maybe 2005 I read this. But yeah, I really enjoyed it at the time. It felt a little different on the reread, to be honest. But we can get into that in the episode. I still really enjoyed it, but I think because book 4, Wizard and Glass, was such a favorite of mine, and I was so excited that I was hoping this would continue. So the first time I was like, I had that motivation to keep tearing through it. Whereas this time, parts of it maybe could have been thinned out a little bit. Not a thinny, but, thinned out just a slight touch.
Sure. Mr. Caffrey, say hello and tell us about your Wolves of the Calla story.
This is Dan Caffrey, and I have a very distinct memory of reading this book because I think it was the first Dark Tower novel that came out live as I was reading it. Wizard of Glass may have, but I was pretty young when Wizard and Glass came out. I remember being an undergrad at Florida State and this coming out, and Mike Rothman, Bill Hansen, who was my roommate, who's been on the show. A lot of folks were really anticipating it, I remember, because the rumor was that this was going to be the home stretch. And as y'all talked about in his books leading up to this, he would keep hinting at it in the afterword, all right, Wolves of the Calla is out. It's this many pages. Here we go. And he did fulfill his promise. It came out 5, 6, 7. So this book felt like it had a ton of momentum behind it. It's also the one that weirdly feels most like a traditional Western, even more so than Wizard and Glass, I think. And King names drops a few of the influences at the end of it that we'll talk about for sure. So yeah, I remember it being a really exciting read when it came out, and I enjoyed it this time around, but like Pfleegor, was a little bit more challenging. And I wonder if maybe that's because I'm obviously not reading it in the middle of Dark Tower hype. I think I was fueled by a lot of the celebration around the book back when it came out.
Man, Dark Tower hype is a great way to put it. This is Rockin' Randall Colburn, many other functions. And besides rocking, and I should say Rockin' Andy Colburn. So yeah, I bought this. I think Dark Tower hype is the best way to put it, because when this came out, this was November 2004. Or wait, was it 2004? It was 2003. I'm getting my dates mixed up. Yeah, November 4th, 2003. And I had, I'd been reading all the books as they came out. I was at that phase in my King fandom where I would buy a book the day it came out and read it. So I read Black House the day it came out. I read From Buick 8 the day it came out. And I read, I guess Wizard and Glass and all these other, but there was so much Dark Tower hype in the sense that all these books, and then Everything's Eventual as well, has stories that directly tie into the idea of beam breakers. And King had spent so much time in all of those books. Low Men in Yellow Coats as well as the other one I was trying to think of, setting up, I think, sort of the lore to come in these final Dark Tower books. The idea of beam breakers, the idea of these, blasted lands within Thunderclap, the Crimson King. I mean, because the Crimson King before, these last couple books was a name that only really came up in Insomnia. And then we would hear his name's written in graffiti on a wall or something, but we would get nothing else really until, Black House, we get a little bit more. So there was this idea that we were speeding towards the Crimson King and this big bad and all these other, horrific things, which I think makes Wolves of the Calla an interesting book, because there's almost a little bit of a fireworks factory element to it, but we'll get to that because I have some questions about that. But yeah, I remember buying this the day it came out, and I remember I was reading it over Thanksgiving break, and so I have really vivid memories of reading this at my parents' house. And the house they had moved into recently had a hot tub, which was very fancy. But it was outdoors. So it would be the middle of the winter and I would be in the hot tub. And I remember reading my gigantic first edition, which is a hardcover, and I'd be reading it in a hot tub, which was very dangerous and probably thoroughly did a number on this book, which when I was flipping through it had many food stains on it, as well as and the thing was, I'd only read it once. Or at least I remembered only reading it once, but I found inside, and this is why I miss having a physical book collection, physical media collection, because you'll find these little relics inside of it. And I found a CVS receipt from 2009, August 30th, 2009. I had bought something with ear in the title. I don't know what that is. And then I also found an Amtrak ticket to
Joe Biden's house.
Joe Biden's house. No, to Champaign-Urbana, and yeah, it's so wild to think about that. And because I'm like, I don't remember why these things would be in this book, and it's also a ticket for my.
Maybe you didn't put them there.
I know, and that's what I think is so. Well, the thing is,
somebody went Todash.
There's two tickets in there, and one of them was my girlfriend at the time, and so it's like very interesting. Maybe she was reading it, I don't remember, but very interesting relics of an older time, and I think that's, I don't know, it reminded me of why I love physical media. So in a weird way, I know, because I am trying to build up my book collection again. So, oh yeah, what edition do you have, Pfleegor, that you're showing off right now?
This is the 2004 paperback edition, I believe. So it's got the illustrations and everything, but it's funny because I recall the fingers on this being pointed like a monster, and as I'm looking at them again, I'm like, no, those are just Roland's fingers. But
those are just his gnarled fingers.
Yeah,
I've got the original hardback from the Grant press, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, which had, first claim to all the hardcovers of the Dark Tower, which was a very good business deal on their part. And speaking of that, let's pop over into the Derry Public Library to talk about the history of this book.
Mike Allen, if you see...
Excuse me, sir. Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.
Tell Mike Hanlon that I had to go, that I had to get cleaned up. Tell him. Tell him I'll see him tonight.
Get out! Last chance, told ya. Get out! Get out! Excuse me now.
Okay. So this book came out November 4th, 2003. It was published by a small science fiction and fantasy publisher called Grant. And this was a story I actually did not know, which I probably should have. But King, in 1981, King was already super famous, and he wanted to publish his gunslinger stories, because the first gunslinger book was a collection of various short stories about a similar character that he kind of strung together, and they had appeared in the magazine's fantasy and science fiction. He thought they wouldn't appeal to mainstream readers. I mean, King was publishing, his Bachman books around this time too, so he had so much content, and I think anything that didn't fall in line with sort of the mainstream stuff he was releasing at that time, he was trying to find other ways to get it out in the world. So he approached this small publisher, Grant, and they signed an agreement giving Grant exclusive hardcover rights to all the stories, including future ones. So all of the first edition hardcovers came from Grant, which is pretty cool. Prior to the novel's publication, 2 excerpts were published. Calla Sturgis was published in 2001 on Stephen King's official website, and The Tale of Grey Dick was published in 2003 in McSweeney's Mammoth Treasury of Thrilling Tales. Both excerpts were incorporated in revised form into the full version of the 2003 novel. It was nominated for the Locus Award for Best Fantasy Novel in 2004. So, I think the big thing here is that, and I have some quotes from King talking about this a little bit later, but what's cool to note about this, and we've talked about this in our previous episodes a little bit, was that, once King knew what the end of the story was, he said, fuck it. And he's like, I'm going to write them all at once. And again, I have some more direct quotes that I'm going to read in a little bit of him talking about that. But it was kind of an event, like Dan said. The Dark Tower hype was here. We'd had all these books that were teasing it, that were teasing the wider world. And then we get all 3 books within roughly a year, because Wolves was November 2003. Susanna was summer of 2004. Final book, The Dark Tower, was fall of 2004, which is crazy. And King said he wanted to release them all at once. That's how he would have preferred it be done, but the publishers were like, we'll make a lot more money if we spread them out. So
George R. R. Martin, take note.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So Caff, you were saying like you were reading all these books as they came out, right?
The last 3, I mean, from what I remember, there was I don't know, we say a long gap now, but given something like Game of Thrones, it doesn't feel like that long of a gap. I remember Wizard and Glass felt like it came out really long after The Wastelands, and then this felt like it came out really long after Wizard and Glass, which I guess it kind of did. I mean, it was several years at least. So these last 3 I read live, and I had read the other ones leading up to it, but like as a kid, and they were so far spaced out, it almost felt like I hadn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, and much like in Midworld, time when you're younger and time when you are older operates very differently. I feel as if the world is constantly rushing by me now, but when I was younger, every day felt like a million years long. And so I remember feeling that it was interminable, like the distance between Wizard and Glass and Wolves of the Calla. It felt, and in a weird way, that made them feel demarcated in my mind. Like I very much lumped together the first three, and then Wizard and Glass, and then these last three in my weird sort of like palace that I've built in my mind around it. And that's because the first three I read, in a rush. They were already out by the time I got to them. Wizard and Glass was a book I read right when it came out, but then there was such a big gap that by the time I got to Wolves, and I think the color, like when I look at the editions too, they're so colorful and kind of modern looking in terms of the artwork and the, I don't know, just the general design of them. And like, I think it's funny to note that all the chapters are in the Harry Potter font. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
I read that. I didn't notice. I didn't know that when I first read it, but it's funny because it has the textural feel of like a Harry Potter book, and obviously has a big connection to it, which we'll get into. And also too, I think because yeah, right.
It turns out Stephen King's also a transphobe.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny thinking about his and J.K. Rowling's relationship now in the wake of all that, because I don't think they're
no, I don't think
speak.
Sorry,
I mean,
that's a bad joke. Because
no, I mean it's not even it's an accurate observation. I mean, he even said, was it in our interview he said, "Oh, she canceled me" or something. I can't remember. But they've had words recently. But
well, yeah, I think he still maintains that she's a friend, but he has very much like rejected her beliefs. So, yeah, very publicly. So yeah, I agree though. There's like a weird playful tonal difference with this book that I think extends in some ways through the artwork and in some ways through the colors and the fonts that are used. I think Wizard and Glass for me felt very regal, and I think that's in some ways due to the artwork, and in some ways with the just general font and the tone of it all. And then here suddenly we're talking about wolves and shit, and that to me is, I don't know. And then obviously when you read it, there's so much playfulness in this book that it does feel and obviously King has changed so much in this time. I mean, since he wrote Wizard and Glass, he went through the accident, and the accident obviously plays a huge part in why these books came out when they did, why he was talking about retiring after finishing them, and why obviously the story as it shapes itself, but we're going to talk about that in future episodes.
And I also want to say too, even in the illustration, and I don't think King, I think Michael Whalen, I think, do the first and the last book, maybe. Either way, I was going to say he has such distinct illustrators throughout this series. Mm-hmm. And here he is Bernie Wrightson, who we know him from his grim black and white illustrations for The Stand, but Bernie Wrightson's also like this really renowned comic book artist. And I feel like you see that comic bookness coming across here, both in the illustrations and also even the way the cover's designed, like you were saying, like the bright yellow and there's a lot more action shots of this. Especially
compared to the artwork in Wizard and Glass, which is very fragmented and surreal. Like it's very abstract, whereas this is very straightforward.
And it's funny too, because the illustrations of Wizard and Glass are also by comic book artists, but it's Dave McKean, who is much more impressionistic and surrealistic. He did stuff with Alan Moore. He did Arkham Asylum, A Serious Home on Serious Earth, or Serious House on Serious Earth. And so very different types of comic book artists. But Bernie Wrightson's much more in that like horror anthology, school of the 50s kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting. And so, I think all of those things contribute to the way I view the rollout of these books. And it's kind of like how we used to always say there was like such a massive gap between Pinkerton and the Green Album with Weezer, and it felt so long when I was young.
Exactly.
And in retrospect, it really wasn't at all. Like it was like 4 years or something. It's so wild to think about, especially in light, of the George R. R. Martin stuff. Go ahead.
I'm gonna jump in real quick. I just realized I feel like I'm going to be a very interesting test case to participate in this discussion, because I've read all of these on Kindle.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And I wonder, and I just immediately thought, I think I'm supposed to help out with the next two. And I'm like, you know what? I should probably experience these the same way everyone else is.
Well, so there's no artwork in the Kindle version, I imagine.
No. And in my defense, I'll say I was in this phase of like almost compulsive reading at the time. And so I didn't want to wait to get the next one. Like I read, I also read the Wheel of Time series during this period. Like I was just needed to not be in the current place that I was,
Yeah. How many of them did you read? There's like 19.
I didn't read all of them. I read like 4 or 5, probably.
Yeah, I think I've read 3 so far.
No, it's
I read the first one.
There's a little library right around the corner from me, and no book has ever stayed in there ever. Like I think in New York, people just take them and then sell them and stuff. The one book that has been in there forever is one of the Wheel of Time books. I'm talking like 6 months. There's a Robert Jordan Wheel of Time book. It has not been taken by anyone, not even the thieves. So
I read like the Brandon Sanderson stuff too. Anyway, I was in this like kick of like, I just don't want to be in my own planet now. So I'll just like shotgun this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's one reason why, I know that's the reason why I have it all on Kindle. And there was a part of me that was like, I know these come out in sort of more interesting formats, but I'm not going to be bothered with it.
I read most books in Kindle myself, like, so certainly no judgment there. I read, this is the first edition I bought back when I first got it. And I used to have the first editions for Susanna and Dark Tower, but I somehow lost them, I think, somewhere on a move. So I think the versions I'm going to have of those, I have a paperback of Dark Tower, which I'm pretty sure doesn't have an illustration. So you won't be alone if you don't have the illustrations for all of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did a combination of the book, and then when I was like on the train, I did the audiobook. And the thing was, this is Frank Miller. He was supposed to be doing all of these, and this is the one that he had to switch out because of his accident, which King references in the afterword.
Yeah, I was right about to talk about that, so that's a good segue. The book is dedicated to Frank Muller, who King says, here's the voices in my head. He did all the audiobooks, I guess, for the first 4 Dark Tower books, as well as other King books, I believe. And in November 2001, he was in a motorcycle accident right after having his second child. And he didn't die, but he did have some neurological injuries and was going to need a lot of rehabilitation. And King started a foundation to help him called the Wave Dancer Foundation. All the income from the Wolves audiobook went into the Wave Dancer Foundation to help him recover. So, stand up move by King, but King was obviously very devastated to not have him do the reading. I was going to read a little section here of what he said. He goes, "What I wanted, complete immersion in Roland's world, and that was what Frank gave me. He gave me something more as well, something wonderful and unexpected. It was a sense of newness and freshness that I had lost somewhere along the way. A sense of Roland and Roland's friends as actual people with their own vital inner lives. When I say in the dedication that Frank heard the voices in my head, I am speaking the literal truth as I understand it. And like a rather more benign version of the doorway cave, he brought them fully back to life. The remaining books are finished, this one in final draft, the last 2 in rough, and in large part I owe that to Frank Muller and his inspired readings." So King obviously was very moved by that, and obviously very devastated by the accident, especially that this came, a couple of years after his own accident that nearly took his life. Cool. One other piece of history I want to touch on before we move on is that in 2003, King was the recipient of the National Book Foundation's Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters Award. This was a really big deal. At the time, King was basically the first genre/popular writer that received that distinction. And he used his award, like his speech during the awards, to almost chastise everyone for being gigantic snobs. And it was very iconic at the time, and there was a lot of people who weren't happy about it, who criticized, like the dumbing down of this award, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like that's important in a lot of ways to this era of King's writing, and especially the Dark Tower, because this is when everything the worlds, I guess, begin to collide in an even more chaotic fashion than in previous Dark Tower books. I mean, obviously in Wizard and Glass, we get this collision of Wizard of Oz with the Midworld and the Gunslinger world. Here we get so many more, and we're going to talk about that. But it really becomes this kind of pop culture melting pot. And it's something that I think King touches on a little bit in the text, but also in his speech when he talks about pop art and popular art in general. So I'm just going to read this little section from the speech he gave at the award ceremony. He said, "There's been a certain amount of grumbling about the decision to give the award to me, and since so much of this speech has been about my wife, I wanted to give you her opinion on the subject. She's read everything I've written, making her something of an expert, and her view of my work is loving but unsentimental. Tabby says I deserve the medal not just because some good movies were made for my stories or because I've provided high motivational reading material for slow learners. She says I deserve the medal because I am, to quote, a damn good writer. I've tried to improve myself with every book and find the truth inside the lie. Sometimes I have succeeded. I salute the National Book Foundation Board, who took a huge risk in giving this award to a man many people see as a rich hack. For far too long, the so-called popular writers of this country and the so-called literary writers have stared at each other with animosity and a willful lack of understanding. This is the way it has always been. Witness my child resentment of anyone who ever got a Guggenheim. But giving an award like this to a guy like me suggests that in the future, things don't have to be the way they've always been. Bridges can be built between the so-called popular fiction and the so-called literary fiction. The first gainers in such a widening of interest would be the readers, of course, which is us, because writers are almost always readers and listeners first. So I think about that a lot with the section in the book. It's right near the top where Jake and Eddie and company are talking about flavors of stories. And then they talk about this idea of a stew and the idea of all these different genres coming together into one kind of stew. And Roland's like, isn't that kind of boring? Just that stories only have one flavor. And Eddie's kind of like, well, that's how people like it there, you know, in America. And it's sort of this dig, I think, at a very rigid idea of literature and what so-called literary fiction is. I mean, obviously King has carried this chip on his shoulder for a long time. I mean, he even talked about it in our interview with him a little bit, and just the general distaste he has for academics, because I think they were the ones who in many ways downplayed his contribution to literature.
I was going to say, do you think that still exists? I wonder about that a lot, this sort of King versus I don't either.
I went to college, and graduate school in the mid 90s at the height of like Madonna studies and whatnot. Yeah. Like the academy part of it, I don't think exists. And also I was thinking like in terms of the, Eddie, what Eddie would say if Eddie came out of 2017 and not 1987. Like what if Eddie had seen peak TV, right?
Right.
Like, I think he would be able to tell Roland that we have all kinds of like collisions of stories, right? Yeah. And all kinds of genre that is highfalutin,
Right. And one of the things I think is so interesting is when we talk to King, he still had a hard time accepting that, I think, because he spent so much of his life being told that what he was writing wasn't of value, and that people, and like, I think he still is haunted by all the voices that told him his work wasn't worthy.
I've told the story in this podcast about how I got sent to sit outside a class because I got in an argument with my English teacher about Stephen King. Right. Yeah.
I love that.
She called him like potato chips. And I was like, no, he's not. He would have I now realize like it's all potato chips basically.
He's fun. He's Funyuns.
It's
Funyuns.
And I also wanted to say it's sort of funny to be reminded of all this because my least favorite parts of the Dark Tower series are when he gets all like the high speech and like, I know he's not trying to be literary then, but it's this like aping of what sophistication is. I don't know. There's something about it that like King is so good when he's talking, like when it's just people talking.
Yeah. Like I think about the Mia
the artifice scenes. When he tries to write artifice, it comes off as artifice.
Like I think about the Mia scenes and how I think some of the writing in it is beautiful, but I also think some of the writing is so overwrought. And I'm like, I would like plain speak. I think sometimes works better and more in his favor than it does otherwise. So I want to pivot over to some things that King has said about this book specifically. I'll begin with the author's note in the back. Dan, you referenced this earlier, but he says, the debt I owe to the American Western in the composition of the Dark Tower novels should be clear without my belaboring the point. Certainly the Calla did not come by the final part of its slightly misspelled name accidentally. Yet it could be pointed out that at least two sources for some of this material aren't American at all. Sergio Leone was Italian, and Akira Kurosawa was, of course, Japanese. Would these books have been written without the cinematic legacy of Kurosawa, Leone, Peckinpah, Howard Hawks, and John Sturges? Probably not without Leone, but without the others, I would argue there could be no Leone. I hope I'm saying that right. Is it Leone or Leone?
I always say
Leone.
I mean, I'm not Italian though, but
we're Americans here anyway.
Yeah, Americans.
I believe it's Leone.
Americans.
I say Sergio Leone as well, but whenever I hear like a really famous director say it, they'll say Leone. So.
Okay. Good to
Italian
know.
is one of the languages where you usually pronounce all of the letters.
Exactly. It gives it that more sing-songy nature, so it would make more sense.
But yeah, and then obviously Wolves of the Calla, for fans of Kurosawa, would know that the plot is very, very similar to Seven Samurai, which is in 1954. It is funny to think about it.
Time is a face on the water, Mike.
Yeah, it's a samurai film about a village of desperate farmers who hire 7 samurai to combat bandits who will return after the harvest to steal their crops. So very similar story. I think King took the framework and ran with it, which is something he's never been shy about doing. Yeah.
And Magnificent Seven runs with that too, right? Like, it's kind of funny because Magnificent Seven's like a Western version of Seven Samurai, and then King's like I don't know, sci-fi. It's a cosmic gumbo.
Well, and Seven Samurai is a version of Westerns too.
Yeah.
Like it's
like a cause a wheel.
Feeds on itself. Yeah. It's almost if it's a wheel. Yeah.
So I got some quotes here from an interview with Amazon.com. King did a lot of interviews with Amazon in those early days. When they had
you might have heard of.
Yeah. It's so funny because you can almost tell that they were kind of, I don't know. It's funny to think of them as almost small potatoes, like, because that's the vibe you get from these interviews, or at least, not established as any kind of powerhouse.
It's like back when they were just a book company, pretty much.
Yeah, they were a book company. Yeah. And they
around when this came out.
And you called them Amazon.com.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's how it was presented, like when I found this site online. I want to thank Bryant Burnett, Stephen King, the Losers Club, archivist and historian. He is fantastic, and he helps corral a lot of this stuff for me, which makes my job a lot easier. So thank you so much, Bryant. So these are some quotes all about the Dark Tower and him working on it, and it's interesting. So he said, "It seemed to me that once I got started with the actual writing, this time it felt like one of those WWF wrestling matches where it's for all the beans. It's for everything. And I felt like if I didn't finish this time, I never would. So I thought I'll sit down and I'll just hammer away until they're done. And once they were done, there was no reason not to publish them as soon as possible. My original request to the publisher was to publish all 3 at once. For various reasons, they didn't want to do that. One of the reasons was just trying to get as many people as possible interested in the books that had already been published. When I go places and ask people, how many of you have read one of my books? They're there because I'm there, so they all raise their hands. Then I say, put your hand down if you've never read any of the Dark Tower books. And always 50% of the audience puts their hands down. And the interviewer asks, why is that? And he says, I think there are a couple of reasons. First, they think it's really different from everything else I've written, and it's really not. I mean, the same mind, the same intelligence, the same twisted, warped person wrote it all. But the other thing is, I think a lot of people kind of felt like, I don't want to get started on something that isn't finished. And now they are. So I wanted to give them a bit of a chance at Viking to reissue the backlist. I think the other thing is that it kind of makes up in a way for all the waiting people had to do, to be able to say to them that these books are going to come in fairly rapid succession. Oh, and because, they did a bunch of re-releases with like fancy new covers at that time for the older ones. He said, a lot of people were pissed at me at the end of the Wastelands because it ends with them on this train that's going to kill them if they don't win this riddling contest. And then Blaine says, so cast your nets, Wanderers, try me with questions and let the contest begin. And then there's a 3-year silence. And there were a lot of people who were just rip shit about that. And so to kind of make up for this, I wanted to publish these as closely together as I could. The other thing, Wolves of the Calla and Song of Susanna, they both end on notes that you really want to know what happens next. They're sort of cliffhangers, but I would say I didn't do that on purpose. It's just that if I'm doing my job, then all the time that you're reading the books, you should want to know what happens next. And then he asked him, the interviewer asked kind of what it was like to work on this series over 30 years. King said, it's like shooting a nuclear missile over 3,000 miles. You're happy if it lands in the same neighborhood where you wanted it to finish up. And that's pretty much what I did. I would say that once I got a little way down the path, I was pretty well locked in on where I was going to come out. Some of the other books express that. The non-gunslinger books that refer to the gunslinger refer to where it's going. I think that if I did my job correctly, people are going to be really surprised, but then they're going to say, yes, it just has to be this way. And that's something he said a lot, that he always knew. I mean, or not always, but he had a really good idea, I think, while he was working on Wizard and Glass, where everything was going to go, which is pretty interesting. And you can very much see that, I think, in this text. And this is something I want to talk about later when we're talking about themes, is there really does sort of seem to be this corralling of all the disparate ideas under the kind of umbrella that will take us, to the end of this story. And we can talk more about that in a bit.
Yeah, and I feel like too, this is the book, even though it's the 5th Dark Tower book, and we've got 4 other massive books leading up to this, and even though the first one does start with this mashup of, oh, we're hearing Hey Jude, right? But then it's in a Western. This one to me feels like maximalist mashup king, which he really went on to explore, not just in Dark Tower works, but it's hard too, because it's hard to talk about that without talking about the 6th book, which I know we don't want to spoil.
Yeah, we're gonna
there's some
hold
hints,
off on
there's some
spoilers
hints.
for those,
There's some hints at the end of this book where he's going, where everything kind of goes under this big umbrella, to say the least.
One really big hint.
Big reveal. Yeah, exactly.
So he started talking about kind of exactly what you're talking about, Dan, which is the idea of the multiverse and the way and the multiversal kind of work that he had been doing leading up to this, and then obviously even after. He said, there came a point, I'd say probably when writing The Wastelands, when I realized Father Callahan from Jerusalem's Lot was going to be a character in the Dark Tower stories. I knew from the time I wrote Salem's Lot in 1974 that when Father Callahan walked out of the story, that eventually he would show up again somewhere. And then there came a time when I realized he was going to be in the Dark Tower world. And then there was also a time when I realized everybody from all these books, their courses are changed by the pull of the tower. And as a result, pretty much everybody from all the books where the tower is referred to will turn up in the novels. There's Father Callahan, there's Ted Brodigan from Hearts in Atlantis, there's Dinky Earnshaw from Everything's Eventual, Shimi comes back, the Tavern Boy in Wizard and Glass. A lot of characters just sort of come together in the end, including one person that people will recognize very well. And we know who that is. He's hinted at the end of this book, and that is Stephen King himself. But this was a bit of a spoiler in a way, not just in the idea that King shows up, although that is at the end of this book, so it's not a huge one, but just the idea that he says, oh, Ted Brodigan's in this, Dinky Earnshaw's in this, Shimi's in this. I think when I first read all those books, I wasn't used to multiversal storytelling. So even when he referenced the Dark Tower, I was like, well, it's not as if these specific characters are going to come back. We're just learning about the world. And so, but he was always very clear that, like, even in the afterword of Wizard and Glass, Pfleegor, we talked about this on our Wizard and Glass episode. He mentions in that book that Callahan was going to show up down the road. He was he didn't even mean for them to be as big of surprises as I think a lot of fans took them to be. He didn't guard those secrets very well, which I think is neat.
Yeah,
I have to say.
Okay, sorry. I was saying, like, I think the tipping of the scales here, though, with like the meta narrative, like it does seem like it really explodes, because there was a lot more subtlety, I think, in some of the earlier ones. So it was cool to see like some of these characters pop up again. But then I was gonna save for later, but like the pointing out of 19. Like once they pointed out a few times, I was like, okay, I can start looking for this on my own. But instead, it's like every time 19 gets referenced,
it gets a little much in this book.
What I like about that is that Roland gets tired of it. Like,
shut the fuck up.
Like, I feel like he's my stand-in for that. What I was going to say is that talking about this now, when I read all these, we hadn't had Game of Thrones season 8, and I think I have a lot more respect for King. Like seeing someone really nail like a universe, like bringing something all the way through. Like Marvel is probably like the most recognizable like attempt at a multiverse, right? Like that most people are going to know. And they have the benefit of like, it's an enormous company and there's lots of people working on it. And they also have source material to go back to, and they get to pick and choose, right? Like they get to be like, well, that one we're declaring that not in our universe, right? And to think about just one person keeping this all in his head, and I like the metaphor of I'm interested to finish the series out with y'all, because I wonder if my feelings for it are going to be a little more warm, because that I feel like, oh wow, this was like this is a pretty hard trick, and the idea of getting it in that neighborhood from 3,000 miles away is the right metaphor.
It can't be overstated how much of a big deal it was when Callahan showed up in this book. I mean, I remember reading this and just my mind being blown, because Salem's Lot's my favorite King book anyway.
Same.
And even though he had, he references Cujo in some other books, you see like Pennywise make some cameos here and there, but to have this guy who you had wondered what had happened to him, like almost 30 years at this point, like show up in such a big way. I mean, for real. And it's funny because I was wondering on this reread if that was going to feel a little bit more diluted, a little bit less special because of all the multiverse shit that we've gotten in the past few years, which I'm a little multiverse out at this point with Marvel and everything else. And it still felt special to me. I don't know if y'all felt the same, but it still felt like this unique thing, like seeing Salem's Lot and the Dark Tower converge in this kind of way. And I don't know, it reminded me of a quainter time. Yeah.
Out of all the books, it's like you wouldn't have guessed it would have been his second published novel. You know what I mean? Like before he was thinking about any of this stuff. So,
although I think it's interesting that the characters he's gone back to for real are Danny and Father Callahan, right? Like our two alcoholics.
That's super true. Yeah, you're right. That's a really good point.
And I think that is absolutely true. And I want to talk a lot more about the Callahan stuff in relation to like a lot of the sobriety themes we've discussed, because I think there is an evolution in the way he writes about it based on how he has previously to this. And then obviously we see the further evolution in Dr. Sleep. But yeah, so a few other small things here. Let me see here. He goes, having said that, I would say in a way, having finished The Dark Tower, it puts a real bow on the whole package. It does kind of summarize everything else. And I think after that everything would be almost kind of like an epilogue to what I've done with my life's work. This is something that comes up in a lot of interviews at this time. We've already talked about previously on the pod. This is the era in which King was hinting at retirement. He'd been doing it for a couple of years. He, when you read interviews with him about Rose Red, which was previous to this, he was talking about retiring. And post-accident, he was just talking about retiring. And I think it really felt for everyone. And there's one review I'm going to read later where they're kind of directly referencing, well, this might be it for King, And it's so interesting to think about that in relation. But he has some direct quotes about it as well. So he says, this is to Amazon still. I think that I will slow way down in terms of publishing because, frankly, a lot of it's a pain in the ass. The celebrity part of it, having people recognize you, that's a direct outgrowth of all the publicity, which is a good thing as far as the publishers and sellers are concerned because it means you have a high recognition factor. But if I want to go to a baseball game or go to dinner, maybe it's not such a good thing. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. You go out and if the restaurant is full, they find a table for you. But then everybody comes up to the table and they want you to sign menus or something like that. It's not a very private deal. It works both ways. So there's another interview, and I especially want to thank Bryant for this one. It's from Good Morning America around the time that, this book was about to come out, so 2004. And Bryant, the file he sent me was a recording, and he goes, I literally was holding my Walkman up to the TV and recording it, and he still had the file, and so that's how I got access to this. So talking about Dark Tower, he said some similar things. He goes, it's all too easy to stop and kind of procrastinate and say I'll get to it pretty soon. But then he directly references the accident. He goes, I had an accident in 1999 and it kind of woke me up. I had been operating under a false assumption that I had time enough to finish the Dark Tower on my terms. And that wasn't so. And he says it galvanized me was what he said about the accident, which is really interesting. He also tells a story about doing a book signing in Dearborn, Michigan, which isn't far from where I grew up. And I wish I could say that this was me, but it wasn't. He was doing a signing from a Buick 8, and a college student said, he'll never finish the Dark Tower now. Well, he said that to King. He goes, after I heard about your accident, I thought, well, he'll never finish the Dark Tower now. And that really kind of, I don't know, got under King's skin a little bit. But then after acknowledging sort of being done with this huge project, he goes, I was sorry when I was done. I was relieved, but sorry. Every time I came back to it, it was like the characters were there for me and it just opened up. And then when they tried to ask King about whether or not he's going to retire, he said, I'm not trying to be coy. Anything I said after this would be kind of repetitious. He's basically saying, I've said everything I can say as a writer, so anything else would be repetitious. And I know, it's so wild. Because you think about even Lacey's story coming out just a few years later, and that was like such this intensely personal book about his marriage. So, I think he tried to convince himself he was done, and he realized
just of all the writers who might worry about repeating themselves, like
he doesn't mind.
One of the things I admire about him is that he continues to work on stuff like and it stays interesting, but it's not like he has like some stories and some ideas that he, you know, that's why we have this show. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And, but yeah, interestingly, the host was like grilling King and trying to get him to say whether or not he would retire. And King
who was
wouldn't.
the host?
His name was Charlie Gibson, I believe.
Oh yeah, Charlie Gibson.
Oh, I remember him.
Okay, yeah.
Children.
Well, he also, I know, right? He also, I was like, I'll probably know him if I saw him, but he also like didn't, at one point he said something about, oh, you started this when you were 22. And King said something like, well, don't I still look 22? And Charlie Gibson, I couldn't see the screen, so maybe he had a smile on his face, but he sounds dead serious. And he goes, no. And then King laughed and he goes, well, thanks, Charlie, or something like that. But it was like, I was like, maybe he had a smile on his face when he said it. But anyways, okay, cool. We're going to pop on over to, I don't have a ton of reviews of this book. I don't think the Dark Tower books were sort of readily reviewed, at least maybe not until the last one. But I've got a few things here. And 2 out of these 3, I think, were written more in essay format, where they were trying to get at the larger idea of what the Dark Tower accomplishes rather than a strict review of Wolves of the Calla. But in the New York Times, they described the Dark Tower series as the awkward left-footed stepchild of his work. And they said, for better or worse, the Dark Tower is clearly an attempt to communicate between the realms of literature and popular fiction. It is a sprawling, eventful tale of demons, monsters, narrow escapes, and magic portals. But it is also beginning to display an intriguing meta-literary gamemanship that suggests Nabokov or Flann O'Brien. They go on to say, early in Wolves of the Calla, Roland asked Eddie about, and this is where I was talking about the stew. This is what triggered that idea in my head. Roland asked Eddie about 20th century America and its narrative preferences. Do people in your world always want only one story flavor at a time, he inquires. Does no one eat stew? Eddie, himself now a hardened gunslinger and Roland's second in command, replies that some in his world indeed eat stew. But when it comes to entertainment, he continues, we do tend to stick with one flavor at a time and don't let any one thing touch another thing on your plate. Goes on to say, Wolves of the Calla is an agreeable and modestly mysterious adventure story, and fans of the series will appreciate Jake's painful coming of age, as well as his plucky companion, the talking dog badger creature named Oi. But there's something Wagnerian about the book, and not entirely in a good way. Endless pages of palaver, as Roland would say, are followed by action scenes that end almost as soon as they begin. King's dialogue is often clunky and his humor leaden, although he's an old hand at these backwoods settings and the resemblance between the Calla and rural Maine is not accidental. A little quaint local color goes a long way. Then there are Bernie Wrightson's color illustrations done in a broad comic book style, which strive to rob the story of whatever subtlety it might possess. So shots fired at Bernie Wrightson.
I disagree with the. I think his illustrations totally complement the tone of this story. I do agree with the action scenes. Like even the final confrontation is very short with the battle with the wolves, given everything else. Yeah, I don't entirely disagree with that review, but I think that they're being a little harsh personally.
Sure. This is interesting too. This is from the AV Club. They said, like Robert Heinlein, King is winding down his career by drawing more and more of his work into a single mythos. Dark Tower references and plot lines have become commonplace in his other works, while Wolves itself continues the tale of a key character from King's 1975 novel Salem's Lot. In similar fashion, the Dark Tower books cross into a variety of realities, allowing King to play with the form and themes of classic westerns in a book full of vampires, robots, dimension-hopping priests, streetwise New York addicts, and even Harry Potter references. The result is self-indulgent, but it transcends genre in clear and compelling fashion with all the charismatic charm of King's classic work and a deeper sense of emotional maturity. Like King's work, Wolves of the Calla is a perfectly entertaining yarn with indelible characters and an eye for the little details that help make a fantasy world solid enough to seem real. But even beyond that, it's part of a vast continuum that seems like the perfect capper for King's career. If, as he claims he will, King retires once the series runs its course, he'll at least have the satisfaction of ending a notable run with a powerful bang. So I think that just speaks to how much that was in the firmament, the idea that this was the end.
It's so funny because we've talked about this before. He's not just written other books since then. He's written some really major works since then. I mean, I think he's written some of his best books in the past 15 years or so. It's just interesting. here it almost feels like it feels like another beam that we're hearing about. Like it feels like the alternate Kansas version of The Stand that we get.
I kind of felt that way too, to be honest. I was like, it's so weird to think of that world. Like now he just openly acknowledges, he's like, I'll write till until I die with a pen in my hand, basically. I would love, I don't know, if we ever get him on the show again, I want to talk to him about that, but we'll see. Okay.
Well, I think last thing too, I was going to say, because with Finders Keepers, which I'm reading right now, and they actually hit on that huge collection too of like an author keeping an archive. So like I could just only imagine how many like storage sheds of writings King has stored away.
Oh, it's gotta be ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, right? And like, I mean, I just think about Bag of Bones too, where he talks about trunk novels so much, like this guy's got like 5 trunk novels. But my only argument against that, and I've said this on the pod before, is that King publishes everything. So like, that's the only reason I might, because I feel like there's very few things he keeps in the drawer, at least from what we've seen. So, but you never know. Okay.
I'm with you. I don't think I think there's very little he hasn't published. I bet there's a couple almost for him to just like laugh about. Yeah. Like he's like, I'm going to publish something after I'm dead. I'm going to publish something after I'm dead. Like he gets a kick out of the idea.
I wouldn't be surprised if he already has something and he's like, this is
that's what I mean. Like, yeah. Like he has planned what's going to come out after he's dead. But for the most part, I think he wants it to be out in the world. I think he loves having his writing out in the world. And who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And also people will pay him a lot of money to publish his like grocery list. So,
in The Guardian, there was built around the release of Wolves, there was a pretty lovely essay. And I'm just going to read this final section from it. With or without conscious intention on the part of the author, fantasy in its various genres deals in the weird special effects of internal reality. In this case, it is no stretch of analysis to see the Dark Tower as a door or a series of peepholes into the private world from which the gory, mucusy, squeamish horrors of the King's stable come. The three who are drawn to travel with Roland are the author's favorite archetypes. The damaged young man who falls in love with heroism, the beloved boy child who must pass through death's revolving door, and a woman who is both highly admirable and utterly dependent. In this case, she's been literally cut off at the knees. And I guess I never thought of the trio that way, like as these representations of his archetypes, but they are, to me, that is a pretty accurate read. Do you guys agree with that?
Well, I don't know if I agree with that with Susanna. I mean, what about her being dependent? Do they mean just literally physically? I don't know. I feel like she's actually pretty independent despite being cut off. Yeah. What do you think, Anna?
I think that King really wants to have strong, independent women in his books, but he always manages to like kind of not intentionally, I think, like pull the rug out from underneath them a little bit, like.
Do you feel that way about Holly?
No, I think he gets better at it. I think he's gotten better at it over time.
I think like Holly is sort of his late career attempt to write the woman he's always wanted.
It's followed his politics and his willingness to like be re-educated. I think that term is bad, but like his willingness to like I don't know, like I don't want to use the word term woke either, but like he's one of the things I like about him and his politics is that he's clearly like able to rethink stuff, right? And he looks back at his own work and he owns like that. Yep, wouldn't write that again. That totally would never work today, right? And I think his writing about characters that aren't white men has gotten better.
Yeah. My it's funny. I mean, I know we're not on characters just yet, but I feel like my biggest issue is Susanna Odetta / Mia has always been more the vernacular he uses, and we've talked about that a ton on the show. Like even in this one, like just like the sugar all the time. I don't know. There is something a little like
he's like committed to it though. So
it's like it's just like, and even aside from the racial implications, it's just so like chestnutty. It's like like honey child kind of. I don't know. I've always thought that a little bit about, not a little bit, a lot.
And
of
it doesn't seem natural the way his mainisms do, right?
No, yeah, exactly. It's like on Firm Buick 8 where we were talking about him. Who's the character Arky, who's supposed to be from Michigan and does not sound like he's from Michigan at all. Anyway, but I know we've talked about that a lot before.
All right. Let's pop into the hook. But before we do that, I want to read the synopsis really quick, just for people who haven't read it in a bit and want to get caught up. So I'm going to read the first edition synopsis that is on the book flap. Roland Deschain and his ka-tet are bearing southeast through the forests of Midworld, the almost timeless landscape that seems to stretch from the wreckage of civility that defined Roland's youth to the crimson chaos that seems the future's only promise. Readers of Stephen King's epic series know Roland well, or as well as this enigmatic hero can be known. They also know the companions who have been drawn to his quest for the Dark Tower. Eddie Dean and his wife, Susanna. Jake Chambers, the boy who has come twice through the doorway of death into Roland's world. And Oy, the Billy Bumbler. In this long-awaited fifth novel in the saga, their path takes them to the outskirts of Calla Sturgis, a tranquil valley community of farmers and ranchers on Midworld's borderlands. Beyond the town, the rocky ground rises toward the hulking darkness of Thunderclap, the source of a terrible affliction that is slowly stealing the community's soul. One of the town's residents is Per Callahan, a ruined priest who, like Susanna, Eddie, and Jake, pass through one of the portals that lead both into and out of Roland's world. As Father Callahan tells the ka-tet the astonishing story of what happened following his shamed departure from Maine in 1977, his connection to the Dark Tower becomes clear, as does the danger facing a single red rose in a vacant lot off 2nd Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. For Calla Sturgis, danger gathers in the east like a storm cloud. The wolves of Thunderclap and their unspeakable depredation are coming. To resist them is to risk all, but these are odds the gunslingers are used to, and they can give the Calla Folken both courage and cunning. Their guns, however, will not be enough. They'll need plates. No,
do you think it's weird? I thought this upon reread. I had the first edition also, and reading the synopsis, I thought it was strange that they revealed the Callahan.
I remember that was how I learned. Was I read it? I went to go buy it, and I flipped open the thing, and I read it. And I was like, "Holy fuck!" Like, not only is Callahan in this, but he's a big character.
I must not have read it because I remember being surprised in the text and seeing the illustration. I mean, you find out pretty early, I guess, right? Maybe I just didn't read the flap on purpose or something. Yeah, I don't know. I
always read the flap, Dan. Always read the flap.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Let's pop on over to the hook and talk about themes.
Ah, yes. Don't you see? Don't you see how clear it all is? Not only can you see the future, I can change it. You can change it, exactly.
Here in the hook, we ask the big questions. And the first one I want to ask all of you guys is, if you were at all disappointed that, and I guess this is also informed by, not all of you will relate to this because you read the books sort of in sequence. For people who had to wait, like Caffrey and I, like, were you disappointed that we spent the whole book in this sort of tiny town when we could have been heading like into Thunderclap, towards the Crimson King, towards the tower? Like, was this sort of almost, I mean, yeah, we go to New York, there's metaphysical stuff, but by and large, it's about this one mission in this one town. Is there like a fireworks factory thing happening here, or did you enjoy that? Pfleegor?
I enjoyed it because I think this was a chance. It does kind of feel like a little bit of a side quest story. Yeah. But if you really think about it, this is the first time where they really showed up and were all treated as gunslingers. Before this, you had like the Wastelands where they were each kind of doing a mission or contributing. But this is when now we're gunslingers, right? And what do gunslingers do? And you actually get to see a lot of like the diplomatic, the planning, the townsfolk, the small folk approaching them and just wanting to be around them and talk to them. So I think it was kind of important just to show like, look, we can actually function and accomplish a goal, even if it's separate from the Dark Tower, but it kind of proves their comeuppance. Like, I would compare like the other books to like the Ghostbusters at the hotel, whereas this would be like the montage of them successfully working and becoming, professionals.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that's what I meant when I said this one almost feels more like a Western than Wizard and Glass does. Because if you think of the way that Roland and his ka-tet function in Wizard of Glass, the past ka-tet, they're almost being covert through a lot of it. I mean, they're in the town under the pretense of escape and secret identity and all this. Whereas with this one, it almost feels like the kind of glorious heroes riding into town. And I think because all of their skills are up to snuff at this point too. So in a weird way, that gives it this kind of epic quality because it really is Roland and team trying to help save the day. And also, once again, I can't overstate, I keep saying that, the presence of Callahan. I think because we get Callahan coming into this and we see this recap of Salem's Lot, and we hear Stephen King mentioned in the end, and we go to New York and all that. I feel like there's a bringing of all the other worlds into this tiny new world, which makes it kind of a microcosm. So for me, or maybe it's just coming off of Wizard and Glass, which was like such a side stop, right? Because it's so much of a past story. I think this actually did feel pretty epic to me, despite being in one location most of the time. It's also a lot of action too. I mean, not in the, like I said, I wish that final showdown was longer, but there is a lot of kinetic energy going on throughout the rest of the book.
Just on the action, I mean, Randall is an official gunslinger now.
Randall Flag.
Yeah, I know. But Roland even says how like there's so much preparation for like 5 minutes of fighting, and that's truly what like people in the military say, that it's bursts of action with tons of downtime and just like digging in between. So I think that makes it pretty realistic. This time when I was reading it, I was like, wow, that was a really quick confrontation with the wolves, but it is kind of how Roland lays it out.
So a couple things. One, I don't mind action scenes that don't last very long. As a reader, I can get impatient because I feel like it's really, really hard to write action scenes. I don't know. There's very few times in my life where I've been like, I can totally see this, right? Like it's the shorter it is, the better. And I actually had this was pretty clear, pretty good stuff. I would say that I think the reason why I remember enjoying this one, and I did enjoy this read, is that all the metaphysical stuff and all like the big multiverse stuff, I feel is better when it is mainly gestured at. Like a lot of multiverses and a lot of like puzzle box plots, it is really hard to make it all land perfectly, right? And I think when I like sort of trying to figure it out myself, right? How all these things are connected. And I like it being in the background. I like the beam being in the background. I like the dark tower being in the background. I like it being the thing that's like pulling them along. But I don't know, like, am I making sense about?
You are. I want to like piggyback what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I think I remember entering into Song of Susanna going, okay, now we're going to get there. Like I had a desire to get there, but then I also remembered, I'm like, but Wizard and Glass is like my favorite Stephen King book. And I guess the reason I brought up the Fireworks Factory thing is it's not just Wolves of the Calla that sort of delays our journey. In Wizard and Glass, we spend 85 to 90% of that book in the past, and it's not moving towards the tower. We're moving backwards. But then we get these like bookends in Wizard and Glass where we are stepping forward and we are learning these things. And so I realized, I'm like, maybe I don't need to get to the tower, because then Song of Susanna is a book I remember struggling with a little bit. And I was like, I almost missed the smaller, like the side quests. Like, I love. I
think he's better at side quests. I think that's. I mean, in these, I shouldn't say side quests, because like, you know, I love his whole novels, but in our lives, the beam, the turtle, the bear they're the things that shape our belief system, right? But they're not like what we think about every day all the time. Right.
That's a good way to put it. They're not the things that occupy our day to day in terms of the action and the relationships that we have.
Yeah, I think so it feels more. Yeah. This book feels more real to me than a lot of the other stuff that has to do with that. Not just because the other stuff has to do with metaphysical stuff, but because it's informing what they do. It's their motivations have to do with it. But we were having a really good like visit in this town.
Yeah,
you know, like it's a lot of the details I think are great. The characters, I think I think the Slightman father and son.
Oh, that's sad.
It's very sad and done and well done. Like I love King's flawed, selfish people who do terrible things for completely understandable reasons. Yeah. You know? So I don't know. Like I think I probably would have been happy. One of those people that would have been fine if he'd never finished it.
Sure.
Like, you know, it's just because we're going along for the ride anyway. The ending's never going to be quite as satisfying as you want it to be ever.
Right. Which is something we'll be talking about in a couple months. But no, I agree with everything you guys have said. And especially like what you said about this is our chance to see them as professionals. I love that. But I think it's also like this is our chance to see them as a unit working together to accomplish a single goal. This whole book, if there is one theme, I think the broad theme, I think there's a lot of things to discuss, but the broad theme of this is really a pretty simple theme about coming together as a unit and fighting back against that which is trying to destroy the community. It's the community coming together. It's the ka-tet, right? Because it's all, and the fear that permeates the book and that caps us off is that we lose Susanna, and she is this integral part of the ka-tet. And the whole time, Roland is worrying, we're going to lose her, and the ka-tet is going to break. It's going to break. It's going to break. And that to me is like, but then in the end, the only way they're able to overcome the wolves is not by themselves. It's with the help of the community as well.
And I just want to point out that the corrosive element in all of that is deceit.
Yep.
Like that's the thing that the town has a problem, because if Sleipman the Elder had not, I mean, I guess they always have someone, but like it's because of lies and deceit that their town is falling apart, that their town is able to be victimized by the wolves, right? And it's because of lies and deceit that their ka-tet wavers sometimes, right? Yeah. Like, and what I love about both of those instances is that they're very good reasons. They're very understandable reasons for not being honest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like just completely, you can't fault them for lying by omission or lying, but yet it's still corrosive.
Well, I thought a lot about, there's a couple big town hall scenes, right? Where you've got people up front and you've got the town and all the major people of the town are weighing in and there's all these different viewpoints. And that reminded me so much of like Storm of the Century. This has popped up in a couple different King books where there are these sort of town hall meetings where everyone kind of has a point, but there is also this question of, yeah, we can try to fight back, but then we're all going to die. Or we can sacrifice this, like in Storm of the Century, it's all about sacrificing this one kid in order to save the community. And the question is, can you live with yourself if you do that? And that theme permeates here as well. And I think that's a big theme of, like think a lot about the way Roland talks to the Elder Sleipman at the end of the book, where he's just basically like, the best thing that can happen to you is to die a hero in front of your son, because you don't want to have to live with the choices that you've made. And I think King was thinking a lot about mortality during this time and thinking a lot about legacy and choices and what all that means. And I think that was a theme that really stood out to me. The other theme that really stood out to me, and this was mentioned in one of the reviews, was kind of Jake's loss of boyhood, or that this was the last gasp of Jake's boyhood. I thought it was particularly cruel that like he gives him this like friend, and we've never really seen Jake have a friend his own age. And it's really lovely to see that. And we get to see Jake act like a child. And the whole time Roland is like, this won't last. This won't last. And then
because we've just seen all Roland's childhood friends die. Not die. We didn't see them die in Wizard and Glass, but we know that they died after.
Well, we see them die in this book, which is very jarring, and we'll talk about that. But but Jake then literally sees his friend explode, which I'm like, well, there goes your child.
Well, and it's also after they're he's like, what a perfect symbol for the loss of innocence.
Exactly.
But when they're having like their little slumber party too, the kid keeps talking to him and asking him questions, and Jake's like, God, he sounds like a little kid. He sounds like he's 5, and you're like, you can see that Jake's already becoming hardened and moving on.
Yeah. And that's sad because he can even acknowledge that that's kind of sad that he feels that way. Like he feels like alienated from people his age because of what he's had to endure.
It's also kind of cute too. Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say because the kid Ben, the younger, slight,
Benny,
Ben the slighter. But he says "guys" as slang, and Jake picks up on it like, oh, that's cute. He's incorporating that into his speech. But you also notice that all the new gunslingers are using a lot more of the high speech when they're talking to Roland. They're not like, what does this mean? They're actually using it in conversation. And you wonder if Roland is having a similar like, oh, that's cute that they're using "come or whatever.
Do you, Ken? What other stuff stood out to you in terms of thematic ideas? Is there anything we haven't touched on yet?
It's funny because I actually think I do like this book a lot. I do think it's one of the less thematically rich Dark Tower books. Like Wizard and Glass for me feels so much about first love, loss of innocence. I mean, we do get a little bit of loss of innocence as a sub theme here with Jake, but I mean, Wizard and Glass just feels like it's brimming with feeling, you know?
Yep.
And this to me feels the most just adventure yarn, I guess.
Yeah. It's story driven. I agree with you completely, that brings me to my next point, which is I want to, go ahead, Anna.
Just to round out the discussion of themes, I think I might be reading into this, but I think atonement is, I mean, that's part of the whole series, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here, especially with Callahan, I mean, that is what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like he is atoning. That's his entire story. And obviously for alcoholics, there's some very specific recommendations and instructions about that. So I don't know if he always intends to put it in there, but I think it's something that you can't not have, especially when you're writing about alcohol.
Well, I wanted to ask you, and this, I think we can talk about this before we talk about 19, is like this book sort of uses the recovering addict narrative and it folds in this idea of vampirism. And like, how did you think about that and the way that those two things sort of dovetail, like the idea of drinking, booze versus blood, you know?
Well, as people need to go back and listen to the episode the King in Recovery episode, so they can hear my full story about my revelation about how I might believe in vampires now, since I believe in God. What's the difference? I've always been fascinated by that metaphor, actually. The idea of a vampire as, at the very least, I would say an emotional vampire, or the alcoholic as an emotional vampire. I think that it's my favorite part of the book, probably. And I wish it was a standalone story. Is Callahan's story that he's battling his demons. I mean, it's almost a little too pat, right? Like,
sure.
But it works. I think it works for me. And his description, there's actually a couple things there's a couple things from his story that I really loved. So he writes about cravings really, really well. And he also says, how can you spend the morning puking and the afternoon believing you are having a spiritual crisis? Which is such a great way of talking about like the self-seriousness of an alcoholic. But the craving is part, he talks about all he wants is a drink. That's the same too. Only the craving is fiercer. He keeps thinking about how the rubber grip felt in his hand, the weight of the cleaver, the sound that it made. Like he's thirsty for violence and for vengeance as much as he is for booze, right? And I think that's the emotional vampire part, perhaps, is like it's wanting to do anything besides think about yourself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so. It's like, I guess in some ways I was trying, like it is very pat in the sense that he is literally overcoming demons, but I still feel like I'm trying to, cause like there's so much like hay made about being among these addicts, the vampires victimizing them, and then folding like AIDS into it, where the vampires are like giving everyone AIDS.
Maybe bit off a little more than he could chew.
That's where I was like, I don't know what you're doing.
I want to go a little bit more into this idea that like it's because alcoholics are ultimately very selfish, right? That's one of the defining characteristics. And what I think is interesting about Callahan's story is it seems like he's doing good, but he's actually still being pretty fucking selfish.
Yeah, is
actually what he's doing. Because it's all about him. Like even killing the vampires is about him. It's about his vengeance. That the line that the other guy at the shelter has about, you drinking isn't going to bring him back. Him killing the vampires isn't going to bring him back either. I mean, maybe we can say you should kill vampires, period. Although he just stops too. Like, anyway, but it's this level of self-involvement that it takes him like a while to realize like somebody saved his life and maybe he should do something with it.
Yeah.
Like as normal people, did you have a sense of like, shithead, maybe that should have occurred to you earlier?
I mean, if there's something that always persisted when I thought about his character in Salem's Lot, it was selfishness. Like that is sort of the feel or like the trait of his that I always remember, and cowardice.
And
I
self-involvement. And
self-involvement.
Like even his spirituality is kind of about him molding it to like get what he wants, right? Like he's talking the talk but he's really just trying to like do whatever it takes actually to keep drinking.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think my perception of him was so much more colored by his role in Salem's Lot than anything he did in this book. So I felt like I was looking at it like more of a purely redemptive arc. I mean, but two things, right? I don't have the experience with addiction that you do, and also I think because I'm like, oh yeah, at least he's not drinking vampire blood from a neck and not saving a family and do it, you know what I mean? Like because his end is so miserable in Salem's Lot. Like you almost want him to die because it's such a pathetic undoing and just such a crisis of faith. And I mean, he's shamed by the end of it. And so for me, I think it just felt like such a step up. But now that y'all are saying that, I do completely agree with it. This idea of just seeing his selfishness kind of dressed up in a different sort of thing in this
because
novel.
His real atonement is what he's doing in the Calla.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like his real atonement is acts for other people. Right.
Yeah.
Is like putting himself in service and really truly forgetting himself, and not forgetting himself, but not making it about him.
And it's interesting that
he's being of service to all these people.
Yeah, and he doesn't say like God has forgiven me. He's like, I'm on a trial basis with God. Like
Aren't
it's
we
about
all?
Yeah, and it's like okay, it's about the acts that I do. It's not about that I've said I've recommitted myself to him. It's about God's letting me back through the door, and I better behave myself and bring something good here, or I'm back out, you know? And
it's always contingent on today. It's always contingent on what I am doing today, not what I did yesterday. Right.
And it's also interesting, and I feel like this is something we talked about in the desperation episode, is that he doesn't even really have a Christian, like he doesn't see the God as sort of the Christian God anymore. Like I think it's more of the AA idea of a higher power is what he kind of adheres to, rather than, because he says multiple times that it's a God he doesn't strictly believe in anymore. It's kind of devoid from the dogma of, I think, his previous faith, and now it exists.
Except when it comes to abortion.
Yeah. Well, okay, there's that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a weird inclusion.
Who thought we were going to be having a discussion of Dobbs here today?
I didn't really remember that section. I was kind of like, oh, this is like very
I actually
blunt.
did remember it. But I didn't remember it in a way that it felt so, I'm sorry to say, fresh.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, our ears are perked up a little bit more on it right now too, I think, you know, or at least mine are, yeah.
No, totally. No, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very disappointing, and I think it's supposed to be.
Right.
I think it's supposed to be incredibly disappointing. I think Stephen King actually has to work a little bit to make it still fit in with Callahan's character, by the way. Yeah. Like, because he has grown so much spiritually, because he has started to see spirituality as something you do and not something you believe.
Right.
Right. And that's a very AA thing.
Right.
Like, he has to, I feel, almost like retcon this pro-life.
Right. I totally agree with you. It felt jarring, like in a very shocking way. Well, that's all super interesting, and we can touch on it more when we talk about Callahan a little later. But just as we wrap up here in the hook, I have to say, like, where I struggled a lot, and where I think, like, and this was something I was talking to a friend who had just finished The Dark Tower, and he goes, I really struggle with the 19 stuff because it kind of started to feel convenient after a while. And I think that it's so easy. And like, I think the cynical part of me was like, well, King has all these ideas. And I mentioned sort of this earlier, like all these things that he's built up over 4 books and all these adjacent stories, all these weird villains and characters that he's had. And now he's got to corral them all and put them in the funnel that goes towards the ending. So how do you get them all under the same umbrella? And I really struggled with aspects of it. And because it seemed like he was just explaining everything away as 19. Like 19 becomes this catch-all term for coincidence. And I will say there's nuance to this discussion. And I want to talk about the vampire distinctions in a minute, because that feels really inelegant, and I struggle with that a lot. But I also want to talk about I guess the way that I found to make 19 work for myself, at least in this narrative, was to think of it in terms of high weirdness. Do you guys know high weirdness, like as a concept? Like it's sort of a psychedelic concept from this writer and academic named Eric Davis. And I'm just going to read sort of the like his definition of it. He wrote a book called High Weirdness, and it essentially looks at the works of Philip K. Dick, Terence McKenna, and Robert Anton Wilson, all authors who King was absolutely reading in the 70s. These guys sort of came to embody through their writing a kind of new psychedelic spirituality that arose from the American counterculture of the 1970s, which was obviously when King was taking psychedelics and also reading a lot of books, including sci-fi, which they were all sci-fi writers. And so this is the definition of high weirdness. High weirdness is an infectious project. It breaks down the distinction between subject and object. It loops and stains. High weirdness is not simply an ironic category for feverish esoteric strands of the American fringe, but a creative and reflexive engagement with those very same religious and cultural materials. A visionary skepticism or critical gnosis. Within this questioning current, the object of weird fascination is folded back into the subject, constructing a strange loop of cultural play, recursive enigmas, and extraordinary encounters that makes a raid on the real. High weirdness is many things, but where I most identified it with the Dark Tower, and I think in general, is in the idea of synchronicities. Synchronicity is something you'll hear a lot of conspiracy theorists talk about, a lot of embracers of psychedelics, people who new agey kind of speak. This idea of synchronicity as it exists in the universe. I'm very fascinated by it because I think offhand I thought of the David O. Russell movie I Heart Huckabees. That's all about coincidences and existentialism, right? And I think it is sprung in some ways from the ideas of high weirdness, like where we see coincidences in the world and what it means. And when I was reading up on some of this stuff, and this is stuff it's pretty deep and academic, and I'm not a very smart person. So I'm grasping on to the parts of it that really spoke to me. But in these writings, a phrase that jumped out at me was the repetition of synchronicity as a resonant event connected to divination, pointing science fictionally to the future. So it's about finding meaning in coincidence, or as it's called here, like synchronicity, that all these things that you're seeing, they connect to something larger, and they connect to something godly, i.e. divination, and they point towards the future. There's also talk of something called a synchronicity mesh. It does not tell stories so much as build a matrix of implications distributed non-hierarchically throughout space-time. A lattice can appear oppressive as well as liberating and loving. One person's blissful realization that everything is connected is another person's terrifying glimpse into the locked grooves of a cosmic prison. And so these are sort of the ideas where I'm like, I think this is what King is up to with all these coincidences. In the real world, this is where a lot of conspiracy theory stuff can come from, is I see this over here, and this over here. I'm going to draw a line between them and build a belief out of that. The way it's described here is less towards conspiracy and more towards meaning, right? Like all these things must mean something. And what King is giving us here is a world in which they do. Like it's the tower. The tower is connecting these things. Pfleegor, what do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say, just having done like some psychedelic experiments, I do remember, like having pretty intense ones though. And one of the first times I did it, I mean, it was just like, it's overwhelming. And the guy I was making these connections to things that I had not made before, and it was sharing it. And my friend who had done them more, he's like, but everything sort of is connected, so you're going to see connections. And I was like, whoa. And that just really put me at peace. And then we started talking about Chinese philosophy, and there's like this saying of no coincidence, no story. So the human mind has a tendency to find coincidences, because if we didn't, then it's like, well, whatever. But if there's a coincidence and suddenly it's like, oh, and isn't it weird that she was born the same day? So the mind wants to make a narrative, but it doesn't it doesn't necessarily have meaning to it, you know. And I was gonna say just the recent examples, like when you watch The Rehearsal and that guy Robin comes in.
Oh yeah, the numbers, right?
He's like numerology guy, and he's like, no, but this is this, and you're like, yeah, but sometimes it is just a coincidence.
But what I'm saying is, in this book, it does mean something, you know, and that's what I think is super interesting. Yeah,
right. But it's funny that, but in this same specific book, we are reminded that this book has an author,
right?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
is putting all that shit in there.
Yep, and that's where I think it's building towards, and that's like where I started to really connect with.
I mean, I accepted it because I'm like, well, this is. I mean, if you try to be in the world of this and not aware of the meta narrative that's happening, I think it would be annoying to have characters just simply believe this.
Right.
But we're in a world that Stephen King is telling us, I created this. All of the coincidences you are seeing are part of a world that I have built.
But I still fight the inclination on my part to feel like it's lazy writing. You know what I mean?
Oh, I think a little bit it is. I mean, it's just I appreciate him kind of owning, like, I made all of this up.
Yeah. But I have a question for you guys about, because I agree with everything y'all are saying, but here is a couple of reasons I run into problems with it. First off, there's just too much of it. I mean, it gets ridiculous.
There is just too much, yes.
And it almost becomes like, I think I've made this analogy before on this podcast or on Halloweenies, but I love the movie Mrs. Doubtfire. But something that's so aggravating when you watch it is at the end of every shot where someone doesn't believe in Robin Williams, and then they'll leave the room and he does like a little thing to himself, like, oh, well, showtime. Like, I'm here. Showtime. And I feel like that's how 19 gets a little bit like, they're like, oh, they counted the numbers on the door. They were 19, of course. Like, it's just this like little button, and he does it so much that it gets annoying. But then on top of that, you have to remember, this is a series where we've already talked at length about Ka, and it's so similar to 19 in my mind. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe a generous read on this, though, is that 19 is sort of the Bizarro to Ka's Superman, because I feel like 19 eventually, like, it becomes a sign of almost like bad coincidence too. Do you know what I mean? Like, Ka is usually only spoken about in positive terms, whereas in 19 you get a little more flexible with it. But I don't know, did you guys think when it gets repeated at a certain point, you're like, man, we already have fucking Ka in this book, like, isn't this kind of the same thing? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on that.
I don't think you're
wrong.
Like
I said, I feel like the fact that Roland gets impatient with it, I think, is pretty funny.
Yeah,
you know?
That's true, because he believes in all the other
and also kind
stuff,
of an acknowledgement of like, yes, I'm doing this a lot.
Yeah. I want to read a few sections from.
And also, sorry. Well, it seems also like it's almost part of being. It's an inside joke. That's another way to think of it. Yeah, it is something that binds them together, and if you think of it as kind of an inside joke, it's a little easier to take.
Yeah.
You know, because they're like nudging each other. 19, did you see 19? You know, like.
Yeah, and this actually ties to his latest book, Fairy Tale. I won't spoil it, but in a weird way, one of the things that's explored in that book is that what is a reality in one world becomes a story in another world. And so there will be these echoes or these rhymes between worlds where things are similar but also different. And that's the same as it is here. And I think he ties into this idea that coincidence is in some way related to the stories we tell and the ways that those unfold and manifest in the various worlds that exist on, you know, in the floors of the tower. But a few
would you say Ka's
here,
more general than would you say overall? Like Ka feels like this sort of all-encompassing thing, whereas 19 is more drilled in specifically in storytelling. Well,
Ka is like fate, right? It's the idea that it carries us. It is inertia in a way, and we shouldn't. And, you know, and Roland struggles with the idea of, do we mess with Ka or not in this book? And whereas 19 for me is the idea of a larger cosmic calling, like the idea of the cosmic is shaping the world to guide you towards it. I think that's like, you know, I think when people think that way in our world, in the real world, it can drive them insane because they see coincidences and everything, yet it doesn't, and they think it is divine, but then it doesn't lead them.
Stephen King.
Like Jim Carrey's 23 hit movie.
Yes, exactly.
The number 23.
But it drives them to an ending that isn't what they envisioned. Whereas here, in a way, it is, because it is the tower calling them. I want to read just a few of these
Is
quotes
19
here.
the tower calling them?
I mean,
Sorry. Is 19 the tower calling them?
Well, that's the thing is, that's what I think it is reading this book. But then it gets complicated by the emergence of the author at the end of the book.
Right.
So I'm trying to view this book in a vacuum, because I know that this gets complicated as our author becomes a bigger part of this narrative because he's introduced at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, I have a pretty vague memory of Song of Susanna and Dark Tower. So I know this stuff manifests in more explicit ways later, but this is how I'm grappling with it now. So page 41, just a few, I'm just going to kind of rapid fire read some of these quotes here and it's all the quotes where they kind of grapple with what is 19, right? So, yet Roland, who believed in Omen's importance as routinely as Eddie had once believed in light bulbs and AA batteries, had a tendency to dismiss his ka-tet's odd and sudden infatuation with 19. They had grown close, he said, as close as any ka-tet could, and so their thoughts, habits, and little obsessions had a tendency to spread among them all, like a cold. He believed that Jake was facilitating this to a certain degree, because Jake has the shine. Later, this is on page 165, Roland says, I look in the trees and see 19, into the fire see 19. Names like 19, like Overholzers and Callahans. Oh wait, this is Eddie speaking, sorry. But that's just what I can say, what I can see, what I can get a hold of. Here's another thing. It has to do with Todash. I know you guys sometimes think everything reminds me of getting high, and maybe that's right, but Roland going Todash is like being stoned. And that makes me think of this high weirdness movement where it's all tied in with psychedelics and new age kind of thinking. And then near the end of the book, there is on page 567, this is of the first edition, Jake is thinking about the various coincidences that have happened near the end. And he says, he's talking about a door opening. He says he wasn't worried about that. From this side, it would probably open easily. If it didn't, good old 99 would get him out again. And then it goes on to say, for the ka-tet of 19 or of the 90 and 9, Jake had an idea they were really the same. Things were tightening up even as the world around them grew old, grew loose, shut down, shed pieces of itself. It was like being in the cyclone which had carried Dorothy off to the land of Oz, where witches were real and bum hugs ruled. To Jake's heart, it made perfect sense that they should be seeing the same things over and over and more often because, and then he gets cut off. But I think what he's getting at there is the idea that the world is spinning off its axis and it is looping itself and repeating itself in an effort to right itself again. It is becoming smaller. Time is becoming looser and stranger. These are ideas that I find really compelling, and I love to watch the characters grapple with it too. But I'm continuously strung between the idea of, is this really interesting or is it lazy writing? And so I don't have a definitive answer for that. And I'm going to keep talking about this like as we do the next couple books, because I'm almost committed to not finding this lazy writing. You know what I mean? Like I want to see all this coincidence amount to something that is edifying rather than shortcutty.
I think it probably does. And I mean, it's been a while since I've read book 6 and 7 also, and I haven't reread them, but I feel like from what I remember, it does, especially with book 6. And once again, not getting too much into it for spoilers, but I wonder if we'll be satisfied when viewing it through that lens as we get to this next month. Sorry, Anna, what were you going to say?
I think it's interesting. You said something that may be the key to putting it all together, which is that what if 19 is actually not a sign of planning, but a sign of things spinning out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I am willing to follow that path,
I like a lot better
and
in a way.
I think, and that's
I like
what
it coexisting. I like it coexisting with the idea of the author. You know, the idea that the author is putting 19 in there because that's the thing an author does. That's the thing a creator can do is put 19 in there. That actually what it means somehow in the text is that it's like a glitch in the Matrix. When the Matrix repeats, when it's actually laziness in a weird way, right?
Right.
It's repeating because it doesn't know what else to do.
And the glitch in the Matrix is kind of an outcropping of high weirdness in itself. Dan, go
Philip
ahead.
K. Dick and all that.
Well, no, I think that's what I'm getting at when I say, oh, is 19 kind of the anti-Ka or like the bizarro Ka or whatever else. Like it's this, it feels like a more negative side of fate and coincidence to me. Maybe not negative, but a more chaotic version of it.
I think chaotic's a good word.
Yeah, I think too, it's just like with a lot of religions, how there's certain like significant digits, not in the chemistry or math sense, but you know, like the Holy Trinity, the 7 sacraments, 7 deadly sins, these kind of things where 19 just sort of is a reminder that there's larger powers at play that are unforeseen or unseeable, except for those who are actually looking for them. So I think that as they become better gunslingers, they're on like, oh yeah, this is that. Oh yeah, here's the beam that you can see in the sky if you're actually looking for it. Whereas, you know, the layman just would walk by these things and not even notice it. But yeah, I think the point does get hit home. And I wonder if he now, you know, now that like the meta thing's all kind of been fucked out, like if he was to write this again, maybe he wouldn't do the math for us and he might let the reader just kind of make that connection on their own.
Yeah. Okay. On the capper of that, the sort of other side of it, I think one place where I struggled a little bit also is, I'm going to read this quote here. You said there were other worlds than these, Roland said, and there are. New York and all its multiple whens is the only one of many. That we are drawn there again and again has to do with the rose. I have no doubt of that. Nor do I doubt that in some way I do not understand the rose is the Dark Tower. Either that or it's another door, Susanna murmured. One that opens on the Dark Tower itself. Roland nodded. The idea has done more than cross my mind. In any case, the Mani know of these other worlds, and in some fashion have dedicated their lives to them. They believe Todash to be the holiest of rites and most exalted of states. My father and his friends have long known of the glass balls. This I have told you, that the wizard's rainbow, Todash, and these magical doors may all be much the same, is something we have guessed. I laughed at that a little bit, because he has dabbled, because when he was writing these early books and putting doors on the beach, right? That was just a cool image. Now he has to work that into the mythology. And so he's got wizard balls, he's got Todash, he's got doors on the beach, and he's like, it's all the same. Because I think he realized his own creation was spinning away from him because there were too many fucking rules. There were too many things that were competing with each other. And then we get the same thing with the vampires, where there's 3 types of vampires. And that, to me, I started to feel the weight of the narrative in ways I didn't enjoy, where I'm like, you're trying to justify the Tahin, the Lowmen, and they're being worked into this umbrella of vampires from Salem's Lot. How do you connect these things?
Yeah,
you know,
that scene. Yeah. As much as I love the Callahan thing, the scene in I actually even appreciated the idea of them, the Sombra Corporation coming in.
Yeah.
But when it turns out that one of them's a vampire too, I was kind of like, oh, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Like, just make it be the Lowmen. Why does it need like what?
You can see the sweat, right? You can see the sweat in his attempts to corral all of this into this one narrative. And I think sometimes I see that work a little too much, and that pulls me out just slightly. I don't get me wrong, I like really love it, but that's like the place where I see him realizing I'm speeding towards the end and I've got to make sense of all this, like this mess that is on the floor. I need to put it in piles that at least align by theme, you know? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, Pfleegor and I we have this episode about vampires specifically and how they're used in the Dark Tower universe. And yeah, I know, Pfleegor, I mean, this is a good question to ask you, because I remember having similar feelings, like talking about how much we love Callahan, how that's brought back, but also feeling like, man, the more you explain vampires, the kind of less cool and scary they are. I mean, because and we talked a lot about favoring the kind of more just parasitic vampire that we see in Salem's Lot, which is much more in line with the old school vampire we meet in Dracula. And granted, things have to evolve at a certain point, but they've evolved to the point now where King has like energy vampires, which he loves these days. And I'm not, but on a Pfleegor, what were your feelings reading this after doing that episode, which was kind of thinking back on, although it's funny we did that episode before we got to this book.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like I enjoyed like us getting like deep dive into the classification, but I do think it gets a little like overwrought, and like the connection to the HIV AIDS still, like when I was doing rereading this, I was like, wait, I totally forgot about this. And then, you're almost expecting that conversation to be in the 90s, and the fact that it's in the 2000s, you're like, you know, for the Dark Tower at least, you're like, oh, this is a little. It just seems like we wouldn't be equating the two, like a, you know, monster with a disease that's totally like, you know a monster to get. But no, I think there's a lot of interesting things, and we found out that vampirism does appear a lot in the Stephen King universe, and it's been evolving though from, like we were saying, the traditional parasitic vampire into now these different forms of, like, even, you know, when you get to the Breakers, some of these like energy vampires that can take the power of the shine and feed on it. And, you know, you could even say now with the brains that are being collected from the twins.
Yeah, the Breakers are kind of vampiric, and that mythology wrinkle adds that to
and it. The magic hat or whatever.
Yeah. And
Dr.
Sleep.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just gonna say, even and I know I think you all talked about this on Fairy Tale, how in many ways King is excellent at some aspects of world building, but he's no Robert Jordan, he's not J.R.R. Tolkien. I think because he kind of just flies by the seat of his pants sometimes, he does have to do things like, oh shit, I gotta explain all these doors now. And even with the vampires, even in here, I'm paraphrasing, but when Father Callahan is classifying them, he's like, you know, 2s can mostly make 2s, but sometimes they make 3s too. And oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then he just keeps going. He doesn't really say why there are 2s versus 3. And so I feel like he's not even quite. He is not as precise, and that's probably good, because I think that's why he's much better at human relationships, I think, than J.R.R. Tolkien is. But he doesn't have that obsession of making the world so comprehensive, and I think that's why he has Robin Firth with him. But I think the problem with that is it results in some sloppy rules and some sloppy world building sometimes, because like even by the end of Callahan's story, I'm still not quite clear on these vampire rules.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Okay, go ahead on.
I think that it really starts to show when he's trying to classify just how smart they are. Like, this one's smarter than that one, but that one's smarter than that one. Like with the Lowmen, he's like, they can do this, but they can't do that. And yeah, it gets to be over-explaining. I assume that what happened is that he came up with an idea for Callahan continuing his crusade about vampires, and then had to kind of explain why it wasn't such a big problem as it was in Salem's Lot. Like, how can he be out killing vampires in New York, and New York not, you know, falling apart like Salem's Lot? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think he had this idea for what he wanted Callahan to be doing, and then had to fit in how that could work.
It's funny you bring that up, because I'm just remembering this quote now. King talked about when he wrote Salem's Lot, and I think originally he did want to set it in a city, and then Tabitha joked that, oh, well, if Dracula showed up in New York, he'd probably get hit by a cab, like right away. And which is specifically why he put it in a small town, so that danger could be more palpable, so people would notice. And so in a weird way, he's kind of falling into his own original trap, where it's like, oh yeah, they almost seem like more like a pest than an actual danger in the New York scenes.
Oh, and also so Father Callahan is gay? Question mark?
Well, they kind of hint that he's, I mean, because especially if you're celibate as a priest, you may kind of repress some of that sex drive, but he does get that sort of kiss on the cheek from that guy he's working with, and it kind of,
he's definitely attractive.
It arouses feelings in him, and you're like,
part of me's okay with it not getting,
not
going too far into it. Like, it's not like I want like a definitive,
right,
like he's gay. I just think it's funny. Like, I guess we should probably mention it.
Yeah, no. I took it though as like, I mean, he's confused, but curious.
I don't think he's confused. I think he's like Morrissey.
Yeah. Well, Morrissey claimed to be asexual. Yeah. But that was just hiding it. But because he had boyfriends on tour. I think it's like if you're an asexual, not asexual,
I think Callahan has boyfriends on tour.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're a celibate person, right, and you're told God says, you know, you can't, you're a priest, he probably never even either, it was subconscious, but he never even acknowledged his feelings like that. It was like, well, I can't do this because I'm a priest. And then when it does happen and he's sort of stepping away from the priesthood, I think it's like, oh, I didn't quite hate that. You know, I don't know that he could have explored or had the tools to explore it, but I think it is arousing something in him. Kind of like the vampirism. This is like a new chapter in his life. And that's kind of how I took it. I don't think it was like explicit, but I think it was also, it's leaning in that direction,
for
certainly.
King, it's remarkably subtle.
I know that's
exactly what I think.
Let's just be thankful for that.
Maybe, I hope this
Okay,
doesn't get me into
absolutely
trouble. I hope this doesn't get me into trouble, but I guess I just assume all Catholic priests are kind of confused. Maybe that's not fair to say, but anyway.
I'm sure all the Catholic priests listening to this podcast will be hitting.
But then
you
you also wonder. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but they traditionally, right? If you were a young man and you weren't married at a certain age, people might be like, "Oh, what's up with that?" So it was like if you had these leanings, either your family would push you toward that profession. So it's like, "Oh, that's why he's not married," right? So there certainly is like a history there.
Well, to do a hot D comparison, it's sort of like if you've never had any kind of meat your entire life, you don't know if you prefer pheasant or fish.
No, that's
right?
a good point. Yeah,
Or
so
goose,
because you haven't because you haven't thought about it, but suddenly someone's like, "Which do you want?" and you have to think about it.
Yeah, that's
So-
good reference
injection.
there.
Hey, oh
Yeah.
God, do you say hot beef injection just now?
No,
Yeah, I
wait,
tried
guys.
to say it
Wow.
elegantly, and then it got swept up, so I just like said it because it's disgusting.
Can I tell you
I'm
something?
very disappointed in you.
Listen, that sounded so genuine that on it that sounded so like goddamn Randall. No, I'm not lying, y'all. I have a window open from earlier today where I was taking a Sporkle quiz, and I'm not joking.
You love Sporkle.
I do love
I do
Sporkle.
too.
I'm not joking. I didn't finish the quiz. I'm not joking. The timer froze on 19. I'm not bullshitting you. Swear to God.
I thought you were gonna say like the answer to one of the questions was hot beef injection.
Yeah, that too. Actually, I was it's a.
That is funny though.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Anyway,
on that
yeah.
note,
Yeah.
let's move to our next section: structure and format.
Look at me. Look at me, teacher.
Okay, there's not much to discuss here. I kind of just want to use it as a means to discuss the language, because we go from this really what's the word I'm looking for, where it's written. Dan, you know this, or Caffrey, you know this, don't you? Know, like when people how Dolores Claiborne is written, it's like
Dialect?
written in vernacular. Well, it's like vernacular, but there's like a term for when you write it a certain way.
There's a
Oh.
fancy term for it.
Yeah, I can't remember it. Anyways,
It's okay. I think you can just say vernacular for us.
yeah, we get a lot of the folksy vernacular, but then we get these like really long poetic sections. Well, they're grotesquely poetic with Mia, like where she's at the feasting table and she's eating all these things, but she's actually just like squishing frogs in her hands and stuff like that. And the language is so like, I don't know. I almost found it jarring, to be honest, like how ornate that language was compared to the more plain spoken nature of the Calibran Sturgis stuff. Like, did you guys find any of that dissonance there, or did you sort of enjoy the diversity in language as it existed here?
It's funny. I was kind of lumping it all under the same, made up words umbrella that King operates under in the Dark Tower universe. And this was the first of the books where it did feel like a little bit much for me. And I don't know why. I don't know if it just is more frequent, or because we get a whole dance sequence or what. But there was it was like the 19 thing, right? There was a certain point I'm like, okay, I don't need to hear Thanks Yeah anymore. I don't need to hear Kamala. I don't need to hear it got it just got a little like ping pongy in my head. I don't know. Yeah. What were you saying, Anna?
Where I rolled my eyes is when he literally does if you look up in Webster's dictionary.
Yes. That killed me.
Yeah.
I when the old man was
are
telling
you Jake doing your final essay and need to pad it out?
when the old man was telling his story and the dialect was so thick, I was like, I am not reading like 10 pages of this. I am not. And then luckily he switched to where he does the thing where it's like, he did this with Callahan, where it's him telling the story, and then we shifted to the italicized chapter, which better sums up.
Oh, and you're in real time. Yeah.
The real time. That's more plain spoken. I was like, thank God for that.
Can I say something real quick about that?
Yeah.
Is that there's a part in Callahan's story where he says it's getting late, and so they like go with him to do something, and Jake meets up and he finishes the story, and there's an acknowledgement that in this world there's actually not enough time to tell this story, but yet somehow they all understood.
Yeah.
Do you know what do you know where I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you could never tell this story in the amount of time that I've just described, but they're all ka-tet, so
yeah. Just in terms of like the word choice and I guess writing. So this book does this, and the next two feel like a different style of writing to me. And I think it is because they were all kind of written together, right? So they're going to have some similarities. But the other books are a lot more like backward looking. It's Roland telling a story of this journey, or they're in, this dying city of Lud. Whereas this one has more contemporary-ish New York City. And I feel like there's maybe more characters. So I don't know. I just remember even the first time I read these, I was like, these feel like distinctly different in a way that I can't quite put my finger on.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the way this book is structured out?
It's Harry Potter font.
Yeah, well, Harry Potter font is very funny.
It's doing it's funny because I'm reading all of Peter Straub's books right now where he just goes all over the place. I mean, y'all talked about that on Ghost Story. But King, I feel like he diverts from it sometimes, but I feel like here we find him in the, it's divided into 3 or 4 big parts. Within that, there's chapters. Within the chapters, there's subchapters. And I think that, to me, that's like classic King format. It's kind of, it makes for a really breezy read. I kind of prefer those like shorter scenes to go like that. And I don't know, it's just what I'm used to for him as opposed to, I think it's Dolores Claiborne, right? It's just one big monologue.
Yeah.
Right? I think, which I like also, but I feel like whenever I see it broken up like that in the table of contents, I'm like, all right, here we go. Nice and breezy. Although this book actually did take me a while.
Well, it's so interesting the way he always and this is why I have this section. Sometimes we don't have a ton for it, and sometimes we have a lot for it, because he does toy with structure and presentation often. I mean, I think a lot about in like Low Men in Yellow Coats, where each chapter begins, or each section begins with like a listing of all, like a little summation of everything that happens in this chapter. You know what I mean? And it's a neat little thing that he does, and he's always just messing around with it. And then obviously in Black House, I know we talked a lot about the ways that book toys with it. So anyways, interesting stuff. Go ahead, Anna.
Well, one of the ways that the structure in this is very much present is this whole, like, someone will start telling a story and then like it gets subsumed into the not a more novelistic.
Right.
Like, it steps out of first person. And I just want to, I found the place where he says there wasn't enough time to tell the story, and yet somehow they all knew it. It's the walk back from the backyard of the rectory to the front door of Our Lady of Serenity was a short one, taking no more than 5 minutes. That was surely not enough time for the old fella to tell them about the years he had spent on the bum before seeing a news story in the Sacramento Bee, which had brought him back to New York. And yet the 3 gunslingers heard the entire tale.
Well, that's him just being like, well, time is fluid, right? Yeah, it's so funny.
If he hadn't written that, would we have noticed that, like,
right,
it's way too long a story?
Well, that's the thing, right? Is like, I kept laughing, like, whenever it would come back and like they would say something along like, well, there's much more story to tell, but we don't have time right now. It'd be funny if Roland was just like tapping his watch, like, come on, like, hurry it up, man.
He does do that thing, like, come on, he does that with twirling his hand, which I like that.
That was, I seriously, as soon as they said that, I'm like, I love Roland's impatience. And he's like, all right.
yeah, come on, speed it up.
It's just so funny to think about like how fucking long that story is, but it is, but like you said, Anna, it is good. And I will say, well, this will be a good pivot into our next section, Heroes and Villains.
I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown. Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
Heroes and Villains. We're not going to go crazy on the main characters. We've discussed them in previous episodes quite a bit, but there is a few, I think there's maybe a little bit more to discuss with Callahan in particular. I just want to say, like, one thing that King is so fucking good at is narratives about like on the road narratives, right? Like guys who are trying to run away from something, have darkness in their past, are struggling with something very debilitating, and they kind of just amble on down the road. They get jobs, they set up shop, they move on, they do that. Like, I would think about, obviously, like, that's why everybody loves the first like 200 pages of Dr. Sleep, because it's
Nick
so
Andros,
well done. Nick Andros is a great example. The guy in the Institute, like, that's the best part of the Institute, is like literally the first, like, the prologue.
I love when you don't see him for like 400 pages.
I know, it's so frustrating. But like, I love, like, just I could have, like, I agree with you, Anna, because I know you were like, why not just break out the Callahan story into its own book? Because I do love that, like, just the idea of this old, like, shamed priest just kind of, you know, riding around in the back of trucks and lifting up carrying mattresses for money and dealing with this debilitating drinking problem, popping in and out of rehabs and stuff like that. He writes that so well with such empathy and with such insight. And the characters inevitably take on this kind of, I don't know, world weary, dust flecked kind of grittiness that I can't help but just be like completely charmed by. And I think that's what kept the Callahan sections really going for me, was you're seeing this side of him that you never saw in Salem's Lot. In Salem's Lot, you saw him, you know, drinking away in his church. And here you get to see him like being this man of the road. And you just learn, I feel so connected to that character in ways that, you know, is so distinctly Kingian to me. So yeah, I don't know. That's like, I feel like Callahan to me is the real standout character of this book. And I think that's a real feat because it just shows you how much interest King had in this character in terms of it being someone he wanted to keep telling that story. And he had so much more story to tell. So who else resonated with you guys? Like, we don't have to talk about every character, but yeah, Anna, go ahead.
Well, I think it is interesting, as I said earlier, that the characters he's gone back to for any length of time are the two alcoholics that he wants to. I wonder if he wants them to get sober. I was going to
say he wants them. He wants to see them get clean. Yeah.
I wanted to mention. I don't think we talked about him once. Andy the robot. I think is such a
I was going to ask how we feel about Andy the robot.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost like
other functions.
Like a Hal meets not quite Hal, but like an evil C-3PO. I think is how King described him. And it's tough because we've read this book before, but I remember being his heel turn being so surprising when I first read the book, but rereading it feels very obvious. I'm like, yeah, of course this fucking robot is like why is he, and they all just kind of trust him, even though he just sort of randomly showed up, you know. I don't know. I know what it is. I think because he is so distinctly sci-fi in a way nothing else in the Dark Tower series has been sci-fi so far. You get Shardik, you get some elements of technology here and there, but the fact that like, no, this is a motherfucking robot. He looks like one of Asimov's robots. We're just plopping him in the middle of what is the most Western Dark Tower story so far. I think that gives a little bit more leeway for you to believe that actually what the wolves are and how they look. And then also, I think it's just like a cool choice. Like it feels like such a distinct blending of genre. Pfleegor, what about you? I mean, you're a big Westworld fan, so are you still a big Westworld?
I'm on and off. I liked a lot of this season, and then it just phew. But anyway, I do love robots though. And I was imagining him as almost like the B9 from Lost in Space with like danger.
Oh yeah,
wolves.
Robbie the robot.
Yes, I can't remember too. I think the first time I read it, I didn't know that he was going to turn on them, but now it does seem, very obvious.
Well, that first time that Eddie asked him,
it's obvious to the characters. Right, like it's obvious to the gunslingers at least. Like
they just trust him from the beginning.
I think it's also like what doesn't belong here of all the things, right? They're like, what the hell is this? Who made this? They're like, I don't know, it just showed up.
Well, when Eddie asks him about the wolves, like that's like you can almost hear like the ominous strings when like his voice changes and he's like, "What's the password?" You know, it's like you can hear the scariness setting in. So I think I was pretty surprised too when I first read it, Dan. But because I think I thought I was innocent and I thought that like, oh, what's behind the firewall or whatever is just the answers they're looking for and they need to find a way to get past that. But now I heard those ominous strings or whatever because I know.
I thought you were going to say like I was an innocent, I just trusted all robots back then.
I hadn't been hurt by one yet.
I love his he must have either he has AI, which I don't think he has, but the programming for like his pettiness when he's like, God, they just ask me questions and what's the weather? You're like, wait, so somebody programmed you to be short-tempered? Like,
I think there is AI though. I think
it must be because like
Blaine has a personality too.
Yeah, Blaine
right?
has a personality.
So I think that there is just a whatever hand wavy. I'm kind of okay with him not explaining it.
Oh yeah,
totally. Technology is sufficiently advanced that this is how he is.
What was it? The Kingslingers? I think it was them who was saying that there's a theory out there that Blaine's personality, like the real Blaine, is actually dead and it got taken over by like because they mentioned there being two different trains, like a male and a female train.
Oh yeah,
Well,
there's a female train, yeah.
Was it the Kingslingers who brought that up?
I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway, but maybe they, I can't remember if they ever delve into that in the later Dark Tower books.
The funny thing is that the female train, actually, I forget the name of the female train, but its final stop is like where like the Fedek is.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, something to do with the lines. There's like a
connection with, and that's where the ruined children, before their ruined, are taken is to that location.
Oh, interesting.
So that train would have gone there. So it would make sense if whoever programmed that destination maybe programmed this robot so they could have the same AI. That's when I was going deep dive for some of the Dark Tower podcasts. This is how stupid it gets. But
it's been a while since I read the stuff with the trains. So Dan, when you started the funny thing about the female train, I thought you were going to say like she makes 73 cents on the dollar.
Yeah. Yeah. Her name is Blainette. She's pink and she makes 73 cents.
She has a bow.
She has Blaine with a little bow on his. Yeah.
Oh my god.
But there's
the funny thing about the female train is she's way underpaid. She has a sexual harassment suit going against Shardik.
Oh my god.
There is.
It's Me Too era
Patricia,
for the train,
by the way.
really.
Patricia. On Patricia's name.
Wait, actually, is Patricia? That's really funny. I do think there is, whether it's conscious on King's part or not, I think there's this element of like diseased technology in the Dark Tower universe, just of not even just disease, but deterioration with all technology. It's rare that something is very sleek and chrome. Like everything is kind of breaking down or short circuiting or malfunctioning. I think Andy is a little bit like that too, just in terms of how obvious he's being, but then also too, we see that he's been deceitful by the end of it.
Yeah, and he says at the end that his battery is 98% depleted, so he's like on his last legs.
And
I do have
Oh, go ahead.
I have a question though, which is why does he warn them that the wolves are coming?
I think it's almost so that they can prepare and have things go in an orderly fashion. Like, I think rather than just show up and take kids.
Is that how things have been in the past? It doesn't sound like that's how things...
Maybe it's just because they now know that the wolves come every year, and it would be weird if
they come every like 20-something years.
Oh yeah, every
he can't even tell them exactly how many years it is, right?
Yeah.
Is it the same number of as Pennywise?
I was thinking the same because Pennywise is 27.
I think that's right. Yeah.
But I think it's not 27. I think it's
24.
24.
Is it 24? Well, then maybe it would be.
But that's the only reason when you're reading it to think that he might be not an evil robot, right?
Yeah.
Is that he tells them when they're coming, and there doesn't seem any reason for
he's good
someone who's in on it.
It is 27 years, just FYI.
Oh, wow.
Because I remember we did trivia, only because we did trivia once, and the guy accepted answers. He's like, 27, or we accept 30. And we were like, no, you shouldn't get points if it's a specific number. But
that's not right.
But I think that's super interesting. I love Andy. I think and I remember when we did our Stephen King, like cinematic universe piece back in like 2014 or whatever, we had Stephen Merchant doing the voice of Andy, which I think is so perfect. And so but then I love his breakdown. I actually have his little like when they dismantle him at the end. I have some of that in Cemetery because I actually think it's really creepy. So yeah.
Can I
any other thought?
Hero in my book. So I really liked Rosalita Munoz.
Yeah.
Because my boy Roland, she was taking care of him, and he needs it because the last time he got laid, I was going to say it for that, but I think she's
some great pound cake in there. Yeah, good.
But the fact that he hasn't been laid since the Gunslinger with Allie, the bar owner, and that did not end very well. Obviously there's Susan in the fourth book, but that's just a flashback, right? So this is the first time, and I love that they're kind of hint in the beginning because like I remember even on the reread I forgot about that, and she's like, oh, maybe I can help give you like a massage, and what do you like it, fast or slow? And he's like, I heard it's best like when you mix both fast and slow. And you're like, okay, Roland.
Did they have it? Am I misremembering the scene?
For King, remarkably subtle.
Yeah. Well, we need to get some good puns later that I'm gonna save for pound cake. But that first massage scene, doesn't he just? Because it is just a massage, but isn't he naked and he stands up and hugs her in gratitude?
Like I was gonna say,
God,
I don't know how subtle it is because literally it's like he's standing there with a boner in her face, and then she's
I mean, again, for King,
that's subtle for King.
Okay,
the actual language used isn't explicit.
I liked Rosa more than like I thought Margaret Eisenhart was like an interesting character in that they gave her this whole Manny story about how she had like left the Manny and then like went with a human, or not human, but like, you know, non-Manny guy, and how she was cursed for that. I thought that was like an interesting sub story, but it didn't feel like substantive enough that like it felt like he was trying to add more texture and help understand the dynamics between these different communities within the community a little bit more. And I guess it worked in that sense, but I don't know. It felt like one story too many, I think. Like, I think there was often some of the character development, I think, with the Calla townspeople began to feel disconnected in some ways from the larger story. It just felt like little, you know, I'm going to steal the phrase side quests again, but just like side scenes that didn't fully weave into the main narrative. And I struggled because like sometimes I was like, all right, move on, like get to it. And so I don't know. I think those are the plays. I like some of the villagers, like in terms of
the Slightmans. I think the Slightmans.
Yeah, the Slightmans are great. Yeah. Like, those are good characters. I
think that's the most humanly.
I couldn't tell the fat farmers and ranchers apart, though.
Yeah, I mean, well,
like he has like a lot of like well-fed, successful men who are doubtful about this whole endeavor.
He loves those archetypes.
I think the Slightmans,
like some of them decide to support it and some of them don't. But who are they? I don't know.
I think the Slightmans, both Benny's relationship with Jake, but then also the relationship with his dad. That to me was the human story, like that felt the deepest to me and the most tragic too. I was like genuinely, it made sense, but also felt kind of cruel. Benny's fate at the end, like we've already talked about.
Yeah.
But
to me, that was like, that really made it. Like the fact that King went there, because not only did it impact Jake in ways that are really impactful, but it also like, it's the punishment, right? For the elder, for his dad, because you know, Roland said the best thing that could happen is you die a hero in front of your kid, and then the worst thing happened, which is that his kid dies. You know, although his kid never found out he was a traitor, but he'd still rather.
No, but he has to live with.
That's the punishment. Is he did this all to save his son, and now he could have saved him by being a hero. Instead, he was a coward.
Yeah, man. That's never sell yourself out to a robot. Let's just see.
That's what we do on Facebook every day, Dan.
No. I know. We're doing. It's probably doing to me right now. I mean, what about Calvin Tower? It's not the. Yeah,
not a fan.
Not a fan.
I get a little, and get ready for book 6, because I get a little. I don't know if I want to say lost or bored, but with all this sort of business about selling the vacant lot and who he's going to sell it to, and seeing these gangsters come back from drawing the 3, it just gets a little.
It's my least favorite part.
I think what I said earlier about, I think King overcomplicates it for himself sometimes. I think that's what I mean. And I think the problem is he's trying to give this New York narrative as much dramatic weight as he is this Western narrative. And at the end of the day, we've already seen some of this New York stuff, and it's also just a business transaction. So it's like not that interesting, you know? Yeah. You're saying, that's
these
my
gangsters have a remarkable amount of respect for contract law.
Exactly. New York in the 80s, I guess, or 70s, maybe they
like Donald Trump, you know, they're
like,
he's like, we want the rights to first refusal, pal.
Yes. He's like, no eminent domain. That
made me laugh. Literally, I'm like, what are these fuckers like doing? Sign. You better not sell it to anyone else before we try to buy
it. I mean, they're already like kind of like gangster stereotypes, you know, like, and then they're total like Goodfellas like toss-offs. And he gives them just like a really bizarre story, and I feel like in a lot of ways it feels like a retread. I think what's supposed to be cool is that Eddie, who was, you know, this dope fiend clumsy dope fiend back in the second book, now gets to like kick all of their asses because he's a gunslinger.
He got humiliated in that second book.
Right. It's the whole logic behind it. There's one thing. So Calvin Tower is annoying, right?
Yeah, he's a little shit.
And he's meant to be, but
he's a little goblin.
Don't make us spend so much time with him.
Exactly. No, it's the amount of time. And same thing with the gangsters. I think those gangsters are in drawing of the 3 the perfect amount. And they're just used for cool gunfights. They're not used for real estate deals, you know. That's just more interesting. And I will say,
oh my God, he should have had Donald Trump. That actually should have been what happened.
No,
not the
I would not be
gangsters, but
surprised
Trump goes in
was
to
a
try
draft.
and make the deal
Yeah.
because he wouldn't have taken no for an answer.
One-
He's not going to wait for the contract to like,
I was talking to Andy. It's fantastic. We're gonna get Calvin.
fantastic.
Well,
Mr.
no, it's
We're just
Towers
going to
gonna
build
make a
around
great
the rows.
No, it's
We don't
funny.
have air rights over the rows.
Oh,
You have
God.
air rights over
I
the
wanted
rows.
to cast
We
a
have air
shadow
rights
on my
over the
opponent,
rows.
Bloomberg.
Yeah.
we always talk about how we kind of hate when King shoehorns Trump stuff into new books, but this is the one instance where if he had done it in real time back then, it would have been eerily prophetic, but then also been kind of just
It would
this
have
cool
worked.
meta
It
thing.
totally would have worked.
And it totally worked because this is where Dark Tower starts to get really meta. So going back on this now, it would have been like, whoa. One thing I was gonna say about Calvin Tower, because I know he's supposed to be annoying. I will say he does remind me of a lot of used bookstore owners that I've encountered in Chicago. Like I hope he doesn't listen, but is the place on Belmont still there? Like, right
Oh
off the
yeah, that
Belmont?
guy.
That motherfucker. Like,
I think it's still there.
Anytime I came in and had a backpack, he would get mad at me. Anytime I was like texting, he got mad at me. I feel like those guys are.
Oh yeah, no phones are allowed.
No,
in
you
that
get the
store.
impression of like you want to buy a book and then he describes it to you and then he's like, actually, I'm not going to sell this to you.
Yeah, exactly. He's like a worse version of comic book guy on The Simpsons. But the one I was gonna ask too. I mean, if we haven't talked about them much, but and they're not really fleshed out. I mean, they're literally not fleshed out characters. But the wolves themselves, how do y'all feel about this sort of mishmash of Doctor Doom, Star Wars, and Harry Potter? Because I think I would have been just okay with the vaguely Doctor Doom with the wolf mask. I think that's enough. With the sneeches and the lightsabers, and even separated from all the stuff with J.K. Rowling now, it just felt like a little too cutesy to me. But what do y'all think? Were they effective villains, the wolves, on vague Western terms?
At the time, I think because also like IP and meta has been really blown out of proportion and kind of like it's over at this point. But at the time of reading this book back in 2005, I was like, what is happening? This is crazy. And I just could not believe the amount of stuff. I was like, this is wild. They have lightsabers. So at the time I didn't mind. I did mind though that when they killed them, that nobody picked up the lightsabers to like use as a weapon or even just to be like, hey, check this out. And, like I could just see Eddie like twirling it around and like playing with it. You know?
Yeah, I actually had a question that I was going to ask a little bit later, just about like, is this world like richer in its incorporation of these like other franchises and scraps of cultural iconography? Like, does it pull you in or pull you out? And when I was like thinking about my own answer, I wrote, I sometimes worry King loves pop culture too much.
Yeah, no, we talked about that too. Well, we always mention how this is more in his modern books, but that whatever you can tell, whatever he's consuming at the time, he just has his characters talk about, even if it's totally off character. Like, wait, was it Bosch? Is that the thing? Is that the one?
John D. McDonald, who I absolute love. If you ever guys do a spinoff podcast about John D. McDonald,
we can do Boschcast together.
But no, in Billy Summers, he just watches. There's like 2 pages of him talking about the Blacklist. Yeah,
I know.
Oh, and Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah. Oh,
also.
Yeah. Well, that's
And
King
so
cameoed on that, so it's he's allowed a little bit of that one.
And obviously, this feels. It's just funny to me because I love how in the Gunslinger the first thing we hear is a sort of Old West version of Hey Jude. That feels, and that's the Beatles, right? That should feel kind of lame to me because it's so well known, but I don't know, maybe it's because it's so well known it belongs in this kind of timeless world. Dr. Doom's been around forever.
Like, what do we feel about Someone Saved My Life tonight?
I actually like that. I actually like that quite a bit. Maybe it's just that the musical cues don't bother me as much as seeing, like, I don't know, just Dr. Doom is such a specific thing to me. As someone who grew up reading comic books, and it's weird.
All the things that creep into this world are like from the biggest franchises, you know, so it's like Star Wars and Harry Potter and Marvel, right?
Yeah. And granted, it's like pre-Marvel and even Star Wars in a way being what they are today, but
sure, but still very popular. And
totally.
it's interesting. This is one of those where I'm kind of reserving my judgment a little bit because I don't remember how those aspects of it are justified and or shake out. I don't know if he's trying to say something about worlds colliding and pop culture detritus sort of like bleeding through the thinny or whatever. It's like that to me is something that I think I liked it when I was young. It pulled me out on this read because I'm like, you don't need to pull shit from other franchises. Like what you already write is compelling enough, but I might be missing the point. It might be about this incorporation of these cultural things from, our world. bleeding into that world.
Yeah, and I think also just the way that Roland gives them a lot of like, oh, you haven't heard the story of this? In my world, it's very popular. So now it's just a chance for them to kind of be like, oh, this is that. And, Roland's like, okay, great.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that ties into the fairy tale theme too, from the new book, where it's just like, all these worlds do share things, right? Like they're all informed by one another. And I think, and that is obviously a thing that is prevalent in Midworld and in these Dark Tower books as well. It's just so pronounced in this book, and and I think a lot of what might be annoying about it, like, and what you're referencing, Dan, is they all kind of come at once with the wolves, right? It's like they're Doctor Doom, they're Star Wars, and they're Harry Potter, and they're all of them at once.
I mean, they call them Sneeches before, and I remember the first time I read it being like, was this written before Harry Potter? I got
oh yeah, I thought about that too. And but also,
and I wish that they had I wish that he had broken it up a bit, like the lightsabers maybe hint to us their lightsabers earlier.
Sure.
But and also too, Harry Potter. You have to remember this book. What year did this come out? You said, Randall? 2002?
2004.
Or 2004. Like the Harry Potter series wasn't even done yet. Like this is a. I feel like that it's. I mean, Star Wars and Doctor Doom at least have been around for decades at that point. But it's funny to me to be referencing Harry Potter that early in the game.
King was always.
It was like already.
It was
like
huge.
Yeah,
huge.
Well,
and the movies had started coming.
I think Robin had asked about this. I mean, because in his Entertainment Weekly columns, King used to reference J.K. Rowling so much.
Yeah,
I remember
Harry Potter.
Robin was like, man, do you think he really secretly wishes he had written the Harry Potter books? I'm like, yeah, I think he does. I mean, this is his way of doing it.
I always think of because in Curb Your Enthusiasm, they had Larry David met Phil Rosenthal. They both have royalties and residuals from creating huge sitcoms in the 90s. So they're two people that can understand like the experience better than anyone else can. So I feel like with J.K. Rowling, he's always just been like, that's a person that wrote like a mega bestseller.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, but there's not many people that you could explain and you'd be like, yeah, you know how it goes, J.K. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's all. Yeah, those are interesting questions, and like I said, like I'm looking forward to seeing how that manifests in Song of Susanna and Dark Tower, because I personally don't love it, but I don't know. It's jarring and strange. There's a lot that's jarring.
And it is original. I mean, not that makes it automatically good, but it was, yeah.
It would be, I think, also interesting, and maybe he can't do this for like IP reasons, but if you just had not just like signifiers from other franchises, but actual characters from other franchises. You know, like if Harry Potter was one of the kids in the village. Like...
Oh God, that'd be crazy.
All right. All right. Let's move on from heroes and villains and let's head into our speed rounds. We're going to start with Misery.
She died. She just slipped away.
Slipped away! Slipped away! She didn't just slip away! You did it! 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 You murdered my Misery!
Annie!
Here in Misery, we talk about our least favorite things in the book, things we really struggled with. I'll kick things off. I actually don't have a ton. I don't think there's a lot of stuff that I like really, really vehemently disliked in this book, but I will say there was some of the power, I think, of the loss at the end of the book, specifically with Benny, and I kind of laughed about this earlier, is that these Sneeches literally just make people explode in very cartoony ways. Like it's literally like the scene in Big Trouble in Little China when the guy like blows up. Like it's very silly. And then when like Benny the Elder is like kissing his son's severed hand, it just feels like it's from a Crypt Keeper comic or something rather than this book, and which tracks for King, but it doesn't quite work for me, and it kind of undercuts some of the moments because I'm just too busy laughing at the image of this man kissing a Spirit Halloween severed hand, you know. Dan, how about you?
Well, so I mean, I think I actually don't have much misery with the prose other than leaning too heavily on the kind of folksy, midworldism.
Yeah, the language got a bit much,
but I like the action scenes. I for the most part dig the plotting. I could do with that. I mean, the New York stuff is, you need some of it, but I think it isn't too long. But I did pull out one individual moment that was just kind of funny to me, and I think this goes. And we talk about, and look, and we're liberal or whatever, but we talk about King's I don't know, sort of being a conventional good liberal sometimes. And granted, this predates a lot of what politics are now, but when he talks about they compare him to a gunslinger. Here, I'll just start. Hear me, I beg. And this is Callahan. We had a president, Kennedy was his name. He was assassinated some 13 years before my time in Salem's Lot. Assassinated in the West. Yes, Susanna said, Jack Kennedy, God love him. She turned to Roland. He was a gunslinger.
Yeah,
it just feels so.
Yeah.
And I know we Democrats all love Kennedy, but a couple of things. First off, I don't know. I think Kennedy was up to some shit. Maybe I'm, to say the least. Like
he was slinging something.
Wasn't great to the ladies.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Like
I just think he had like a y'all see blonde. Am I right? No, but I think just it's easy to idolize him. But I'm like, maybe not the. I mean, the Kennedys. I just think they have a lot of skeletons, and I don't mean the fun spooky kind from Halloween. And so it's this weird, I'm just like sort of always hesitant. I'm always suspicious.
I know what you mean.
I'm always suspicious of that kind of talk about any politician, really, but let alone like, here's who we're going to compare to a gunslinger, fucking John F. Kennedy.
I had specifically had a problem with that because, like, I think she means it like he was a man of honor.
Exactly. Yeah. And
right?
He wasn't the man of honor.
He legit wasn't. Like, he plagiarized his book.
It's like aristocratic prep boy.
They should have said,
he was a dope fiend, which
that Ralph Nader. He's a gunslinger.
Or he wasn't a dope fiend, but he was on drugs in office and covering that up.
And they should have.
He almost got us into a war. Like, I don't know.
And they should have been like,
first when she said that, I thought it was a reference to like almost getting us into a nuclear war.
Yeah. No, that's it. They should have been like, and one of his relatives is anti-vax and he was the cause of Captain Tricks or something. But no, it is just this thing of it. Just if you're gonna say, we have gunslingers in our world, it just seems like there are better analogies for that, and it just seems like this kind of doughy-eyed or starry-eyed liberalism that just kind of drives me crazy. And I think that kind of starry-eyed liberalism has only become. I should say starry-eyed neoliberalism has only become more prevalent in the past few years when you look at like I don't know, Brooklyn Dad Defiant or some shit, it just reminds you of that kind of thing.
You are too online if you get that reference.
Yeah, oh god, I wish I didn't know that reference. But it's, and once again, different times. This predates a lot of the political landscape now, but it just didn't. It just really stuck out for me. So yeah.
Speaking of something that predates the political landscape but is ripe for discussion, I guess I'd put that abortion discussion in my misery.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's both, but mainly because it does feel like he's like had to backtrack on Callahan.
That's the thing is it's not that I'm like that I think the act itself or like the scene itself is bad. It just doesn't track with that version of the character. And so it just feels unnecessary and like plotty. I guess it just feels like
it feels like he had to explain why she doesn't abort it.
Exactly.
But really, it would have been so much better if it refused to be aborted.
Right.
Oh, that's actually a good idea. Yeah.
Like
that would have been cool
if they tried and then just like, sorry, still in there.
You're right, because that would have had to come up like, why didn't you try to get rid of it? And I think that would have been a much smoother way to handle it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pfleegor, what do you think?
I just
misery.
Not specific sections, but I do think some of the pacing and like I think going to New York. Maybe we spent a little too much time there. Not misery per se, but when the door's sort of following them, that was always very strange to me. I'm like,
funny image.
Yeah, it's like
it is a funny image.
I kind of like it for how
it is funny.
It is almost treated as comic.
Yeah, but it's like you like catch it in your peripheral vision. All right, it's the door that's following me.
That fucking door again.
Just like door. I'm getting on the subway.
What was that?
The door for the door.
What was that? Oh my god! What? Not something awful. Remember that site? What was that movie, Pfleegor, that they made? It was like a Joe horror movie called Doom House, and they go, "Oh no, not a Doom House!" Like that's what that reminds me of. Like, the door that's following me.
So stupid. But I think in the next two books too, we especially have a lot more New York. So I know they kind of had to maybe segue us back into it because I don't believe we've done a lot of it since book 2.
Book
right?
3,
I don't think
there's been
book 3. There's there a little bit.
I think that's when like Calvin Towers introduced is in book 3.
Yeah,
and I remember being like, oh wait, this guy's gonna be a major character. And then like that scene when Callahan is assaulted by the Hitler guys or whatever, and
the Hitler brothers.
It's pretty obvious like who saves them. And I remember realizing it as I was reading, being like, oh god, like they're that deep in the plot, like ugh. So, and I know we're gonna get more of that next book, but Yeah. Any other misery before we pop on over to the good stuff?
King really loves it when his villains get hard-ons when they do violence.
Oh yeah, that's
he also
a good
loves to
point.
make he also likes to make people fart when they are getting violence done against them.
Under the dome,
Or
I can't wait
shit
till
themselves, or like he's well, we all know how he feels about most bodily function.
Yeah.
He like loves to talk about the lower bodily functions.
Yes, he
That's
does.
his
Right?
thing.
There's a pissing yourself in this.
Oh yeah.
Yep,
Oh,
and
yeah.
there's a couple of pissing yourselves and one pissing and shitting yourself, in case anybody's counting.
I always am. Okay, cool. Let's head over to word processor of the gods.
And we're gonna make a new rule. Whenever I'm in here, you hear me typing. Whether you don't hear me typing, what the fuck you hear me doing in here, when I'm in here, that means that I am working. That means don't come in. Now, do you think you can handle that?
Yeah.
Fine. Why don't you start right now and get the fuck out of here?
All right, here in Word Processor of the Gods, we talk about our favorite bits of writing. I can kick us off. This kind of ties into what I was saying about how I like the kind of boyhood to adulthood moment with Jake here. So this is on page 204 of the first edition. Roland hoped neither his voice nor his face would give away any of the sorrow and regret he suddenly felt. Here was a boy who was now ashamed of being a boy. He had made a friend, and the friend had invited him to stay over, as friends sometimes do. Benny had undoubtedly promised that Jake could help him feed the animals and perhaps shoot his bow, or his ba, if it shot bolts instead of arrows. There would be places Benny would want to share, secret places he might have gone to with his twin in other times. A platform in a tree, mayhap, or a fish pond in the reeds special to him, or a stretch of riverbank where pirates of Eld were reputed to have buried golden jewels. Such places as boys go. But a large part of Jake Chambers was now ashamed to want to do such things. This was the part that had been despoiled by the doorkeeper in Dutch Hill, by Gasher, by the TikTok man, and by Roland himself, of course. Were he to say no to Jake's request now, the boy would very likely never ask again, and never resent him for it, which was even worse. Were he to say yes in the wrong way, with even the slightest trace of indulgence in his voice, for instance, the boy would change his mind. So I love that because not only is it just a great summation of Roland's fatherly instincts toward him, but also this kind of doomed knowledge of how doomed this kid is in terms of losing whatever innocence he has inside of him. It's also, there's this really lovely understanding of the balance of inflection, like the way you say something, how it impacts people. And I love to see Roland weighing that. It's just really good writing. So what else do you guys have?
I didn't
Pfleegor?
write down.
Or Caff, you go.
When I was a bad boy. I didn't write down passages for this time, but one part I wanted to call out was I actually really enjoy Aid's weirdness aside. I really enjoy a lot of Callahan's flashbacks. And once again, Salem's Lot's my favorite book. I just think it was such a cool thing to, even more so than how he ties into the Dark Tower lore. I just really enjoyed seeing Salem's Lot from his point of view and then the bridge to the next section of his life. But I love where he talks about I don't think this is real, but the footbridge that crosses the Hudson into New Jersey. And it obviously ties into how he ends up coming to Midworld. I doubt he talks about how it's like right under, I think, the regular I guess the George Washington Bridge.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was such a cool deal. It literally made me want to go, oh, I need to go find that. But I'm like, wait, no, that doesn't exist. It's like it's part of a pathway to a supernatural world. Maybe it does that. I don't know. We'll have to go see.
Well,
so that was.
The Kings love bridges. Like they love the idea of the very literal idea of bridges being a connection between two worlds. That even transferred down to Joe Hill with Nosferatu. It's and so I love that because it felt very kingy, but it's also rendered in a really beautiful way. So.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, and just any of the Callahan stuff I was really into.
Yeah, I just wrote down full passages, just a few of my favorite Roland quotes. Because I like when he becomes a hard ass and gets impatient.
Yeah.
So at one point, I think it's Benny the elder, but he's speaking and he's like, well, I think, and Roland goes, what you think or believe is nothing to me. It just like shuts him down. It's like,
yeah, Roland
I like
brutal.
to imagine Idris Elba in the role.
Oh yeah.
I still think he's a great Roland. He just needs a good movie behind it. But
yeah.
So I like that.
Roland's at his most impatient in this book, I think, because 6 and 7 he's like on the quest again. Here, yeah, he almost seems like he's at his wit's end.
Yeah, and then when he's giving like the motivational speech to the townspeople, and he's like, no quarter, kill them all. And it's cool because, and they talk about too in the book how, you know, he feels most comfortable at that moment right when you're about to get into battle. And he just like, it's like an athlete going on the field, right? They're like, nothing else matters except for the game at this point. So seeing Roland get that hyped and being able to spread his confidence is cool. One thing too, he said, the head clear, mouth shut, see much, say little.
Yeah, it's good.
I dig that. And then the last one is only because I've been listening to the Dan Carlin podcast about like Greek city-states recently. And there's a famous if quote. So Roland's is if. An old teacher of mine used to call it the only word 1,000 letters long. And in Sparta, Philip II of Macedon was going to invade Sparta. And he's basically like, if we go there, we're going to destroy your walls and your entire civilization will be destroyed. And the Spartans wrote back, if. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So cool. So
yeah,
those are mine.
Anna, what do you have?
I have like a one line that it's literally like a single line.
That's
but
fine.
I was like, wow, that is good. It's not pretty though. It's when he talks about one of the gangsters. He simply looked at Calvin Tower, muddy brown eyes peering out from beneath the unlovely bulge of his skull, like mean little animals peering out of a cave.
I underlined
that's
that.
real
That's
good.
really cool. I love
that's
that.
like really, really good.
Go ahead.
And then of course I just will. Yes, I think all of the Callahan stuff is like really good, and he just that cycle of drinking and not being able to stop, like wanting to stop, but also kind of not wanting to stop, and that he captures it really, really well. So
I've got this quote here. It's near the end, 686. All gone, Roland said. I counted 61, and they all lie here on the road or in our ditch. For a moment, Tian's wife only stood there, processing this information. Then she did something that surprised a man who was not often surprised. She threw herself against him, pressing her body frankly to his, and covered his face with hungry, wet-lipped kisses. Roland bore this for a little bit, then held her away. The sickness was coming now, the feeling of uselessness, the sense that he would fight this battle or battles like it over and over for eternity, losing a finger to the lobstrosities here, perhaps an eye to a clever old witch there, and after each battle he would sense the Dark Tower a little farther away instead of a little closer, and all the time the dry twist would work its way in towards his heart. So sad, and like, I think a great summation of the years having completely ruined Roland in a lot of ways. That to me was extremely effective. And just that idea of like, even after doing something useful and helping people, that feeling of uselessness, like, but what is it actually accomplishing in the long term? Yeah. And that's perhaps like when you are chasing something like the tower and you can equate that with God or anything else, it is sometimes, no matter what you do in service to that, you never feel closer to it. As somebody who used to be very religious, I can identify with that. It's like, but it's interesting to see him do it here in relation to the tower.
Well,
so
very, very weighted statement. That's all I can say. Like, lots of significance to that line.
Yeah, well, and I was gonna say, I mean, a running theme throughout this whole series is how Roland, as much of a hero as he can be, I mean, he's willing to leave behind anyone and everything for the tower, right? And that is, yeah. And I think that, like Pfleegor saying, that weight just increases and increases as the series goes on. You're starting to feel that world weariness. Maybe that's why he's so impatient and thus funny in this book too, because it's like he knows he has to stop and help these people, but it's also like, well, I would. And in a weird way, he criticizes, Ben Slightman for selling people out. But I mean, I'd argue that Roland has sold people out leading up to this point. Probably.
Well, he acknowledges that. He says that he acknowledges all the mistakes he's made too. But yeah, and like the clock is ticking, because it's like in this book too, he starts to feel arthritis coming on. So he needs his fucking hands, man. Okay, let's move on to the cemetery.
I have one last thing.
Yeah.
Actually.
Oh, okay.
Because we mentioned the abortion scene being kind of a misery because just of it feels like unfair to Callahan in some ways, but there is a couple good lines in that. This is Roland thinking. Now that this subject had pounced on them like a Jilly out of her box, Susanna was no longer Susanna to this man. She had become the woman. And another thought, how many monsters had Pierre Callahan slain himself with his own hand?
Yeah.
So I like that. And then also, your man Jesus seems to me a bit of a son of a bitch when it comes to women. Was he ever married?
He dated whores.
That.
That's what he says, and he's like,
"Yeah,
okay,
it's good. It's good."
Okay, let's move on to our next section, the cemetery.
What's the bottom of the truth?
Well, sometimes that is better. The person you put up there ain't the person that comes back. It may look like that person, but it ain't that person. Because whatever lives in the ground beyond that cemetery ain't human at all.
Here in the cemetery, we talk about the spookiest moments, the stuff that freaked us out. This isn't really a horror novel, but there were a few things that I found pretty creepy in here. Caffrey, what about you? What spooked you?
I know this is such a cop-out, but all the Salem's Lot stuff. I mean,
yeah.
I like those passages where we see everything from Callahan's point of view, because I feel like it sort of snaps back into the writing style of Salem's Lot, but also feels like a new thing because it's through this backward-looking context of the Dark Tower series. And I think, too, why, I don't know, I'm a big fan of RLQ signaling monsters. And so I think that's why I like the chimes and the Elton John song and everything else. I think that feeling you get in New York, that you're, or any big city really, that you're being followed, right? And then those suspicions being proven right by Father Callahan and just his gradual realization of the vampires and what they are. Granted, I don't think the categorization is so scary, but just as he starts to talk about this increased awareness of the supernatural, and not just the vampires too, but is it Tahin or Cantoi? He meets Tahin, I guess, right? For the
Tahin is what the references. Yeah.
In the same way that Hearts and Atlantis gets a little bit creepy with the sort of sensing that something's not quite right. I think that whole stretch is the creepiest for me. I'll say that I guess the idea of being ruined is pretty freaky, just as it's introduced. But yeah, it wasn't like I was reading a bunch of passages in this and like quivering with the bed sheets, over my face. Well, it's not one of his scariest books.
Along those lines, like the Tahin stuff and the Lowman stuff, like was pretty freaky to me too. Like, and it's stuff that he's essentially carrying over from Lowman and Yellow Coats. But on page 290, Callahan's talking about seeing the chalk drawings, and I always found that really creepy. But I love when he says, 2 nights later, I saw one on the sidewalk outside a bar on Lex where I like to drink and sometimes have a sandwich if I was, as they say, in funds. It had been done in chalk and the foot traffic had rubbed it to a ghost, but I could still read it. It said the same thing. He comes here. He has a burned hand. There were comets and stars around the message, as if whoever wrote it had actually tried to dress it up. A block down, spray painted on a no parking sign. His hair is mostly white now. The next morning on the side of a crosstown bus, his name might be Collingwood. 2 or 3 days after that, I started to see lost pet posters around a lot of the places that come to me, my places. And he says, they were all the same. Have you seen our Irish setter? He is a stupid old thing, but we love him. Burned right forepaw. Answers to the name of Kelly, Collins, or Collingwood. We will pay a very large reward. It's like just the idea that they're getting closer to him and they're chronicling that sense of awareness of him, like in real time. Very, very unnerving to me. Like even just, I know when he sees that they know his name is Callahan, that's just like, I don't know. It's so creepy. And then I've got one other as well, but Anna, do you have anything?
Does gross stuff?
Yes.
Here?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
So the Mia scenes are pretty intensely unpleasant. But even the scenes where we don't know she's dining on swamp things, the way she's eating is really gross too. Like the way, I mean, I know knowing what's coming, like this is all intentional, right? But like there is the one that I almost don't want to read this out loud because it's so gross. Well, to me
it is very gross.
Raising her face, she puts her face in a bowl of caviar and says, raising her face again, smiling delicately and demurely in the glow of the electric torches, the fish eggs standing out like black sweat on her brown skin, dotting her cheeks and her brow, nestling around her nostrils like clots of old blood.
Caviar up the nose would be, I like caviar, but up the nose, clots
blow
of
a few
old
lines
blood
of caviar. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
One of the things I remembered from this book throughout all the years was the way she squishes the frog in her hand and the way he describes it, because it's so disgusting.
She puts it down her throat like a Go-Gurt.
Right? Yeah.
Hey, but she thinks it tastes good, so more power to her, right?
Pfleegor, what do you have?
So I have two things. One is when they do transport, when they go like Todash, the like Roland putting the bullets in his ears because of the chimes is pretty freaky, and like the voices, and it just reminds me of Hellraiser when the sort of like the bells start ringing and tolling when the Cenobites are approaching. To me, the feasting on the brains is freaky because I went this internet deep dive into like brain disorders, and there's a disease called Kuru. And people who are cannibals, like tribes around the world that actually will eat bodies, like in a funerary rite or whatever, if you eat brains of humans, you actually expose yourself to this bad disease that only attacks you if you eat brains. And it gives you like laughing illness. It makes you sort of go insane. So anything with eating of brains, and I was trying to get more detail on how exactly those kids' brains are transferred to the breakers, and imagining that if they only come every 24 years, if they must be like going to different worlds and different towns and just putting them on schedule so that enough kids build up so that they can then feed the brains. So I just ended up thinking about that probably way too much. And then the other thing too is there's a quote about when Callahan meets Walter, and he's like, I get the impression this is a guy who laughs in his own head a lot. And I thought that was just really disturbing because I was like, do I laugh in my own head? But then knowing Walter's, and Flag, I guess at this point, no, but just that would be so weird to be like maniacally laughing to yourself constantly.
I love seeing Walter in this. Like that scene is so creepy and fun. I don't know. I love Flag.
Ditto.
I've got this section, page 145. It's about what happens when the kids return from being ruined. And he talks about them growing. And he says, you can have no idea what it's like if you haven't seen it and been through it, Tian said. He was looking into the ashes of the fire. You can have no idea of the pain it causes them. When a babby cuts his teeth, you ken how they cry? Yes, Susanna said. Tian nodded. It's as if their whole bodies are teething. Hear him, Overholzer said. For 16 or 18 months, all my brother did was sleep and eat and cry and grow. I can remember him crying even in his sleep. I'd get out of my bed and go across to him, and there'd be a whispering sound from inside his chest and legs and head. 'Twere the sound of his bones growing in the night. Eddie contemplated the horror of it. You heard stories about giants, fee-fi-fo-fum, and all that, but until now he'd never considered what it might be like to become a giant, as if their whole bodies are teething. And then later they talk
teething
about
phrases.
I know, and then later it says the whispering in the nights as their bones grow, the headaches as their skulls grow. Zolman screamed one time for 9 days without stopping. Eddie could see the horror in her eyes. He could see it very well. His cheekbones pushed up. You could see it happening. His forehead curved out, and if you held an ear close to it, you could hear the skull creaking as it spread. It sounded like a tree branch under a weight of ice. And his bones went on yet a while, his skeleton do ya, but his head was the worst of it, and it finally stopped. Tell God's thank you, and man, Jesus too. Yeah, it's just like absolutely terrifying, like that general description of it, like the whispering of the bones in their body. That really got to me. I thought that I have one last one. Page 186. This is when they see the dead people in New York, like Susanna and Eddie. What is it? The Vagrant Dead, I believe they're called. This is just super creepy. Half a dozen people were crossing 46 toward them. 5 were normal. The 6th was a white-faced woman in a moss-splotched dress. The sockets of her eyes were empty and black. Her mouth hung open seemingly all the way down to her breastbone. And as Susanna watched, a green worm crawled over the lower lip. Those crossing with her gave her her own space, just as the other pedestrians on 2nd Avenue had given Roland and his friends theirs. Susanna guessed that in both cases, the more normal promenaders sensed something out of the ordinary and steered clear. Only this woman wasn't Todash. This woman was dead. Very, very creepy. And a little bit of King's Dominion that I will talk about later.
Do you guys think that having the dead on top of the vampires on top of the title, like,
totally unnecessary?
I did think the individual scenes are creepy, but I was like, man, really, we need zombies now too? I don't know.
Well, because then later Roland's like, oh yeah, the wolves are zombies, and before I knew that they were robots, I was like, wait, is he lying or is he serious? Because I don't need zombies too.
Because there are zombies here. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's move on to Pound Cake.
After all you've been taught, everyone isn't bad, Mama. Everything isn't a sin.
Come to your closet and pray. Ask to be forgiven.
He's a nice boy, Mom. You like him. You really like him, Mama.
Okay, here in Pound Cake, we talk about the bluer side of King. The boners and the farts and the poop. What do you guys have?
I have to start with just in the beginning. Caffrey's got like 1 million dog ears.
No. I just got a couple. You're probably gonna do well here.
I'll just do this one because I don't have many. So the cum chant when Jake's like, "Oh, that's a word that kids used to use for jizz." Like, that's just the funniest word.
That is something a kid would say. Would think probably. I love it.
Let me. Okay, this is we touched on this a little bit, but I want to read the exact like pun from it. This is when Roland and Rosalita are consummating their up to this point just a flirtation. Okay, so he says, "Aye, and when you rub me with that magic oil of yours again, is it rubbed you'd be? Aye, rubbed hard or rubbed soft? I've heard a little bit of both these is an aching joint." She considered this, then burst into laughter and took his hand. "Come while the sun shines and this little corner of the world sleeps." Just the I've heard a little bit of both at best eases an aching joint. I don't know why that was like, it was so like,
he was like tugging on his dick when he said that.
But you didn't use he came with her willingly and went where she took him. She kept a secret spring surrounded by sweet moss, and there he was refreshed.
Man, pubic hair is so moss. Yeah, that's great.
Sweet spring. I like that.
I there's also too.
I don't.
I feel like this also.
It's not the stuff that's coming out of it that's like.
It's the problem is moss. I'm always gonna think green with moss. Hey, maybe she has green pubic hair. Who knows? But like I
green also, pubes. Call back to Lawnmower Man.
Okay. Yeah. King's
Dominion.
Right? Well, and also too this sort of sets the tone for some other sex scenes we're gonna get from Roland. Spoiler alert in later books with just kind of random people. It's just always this like oh and da. It's like this.
Yeah, there's the little chuckle.
Yeah, like the little soft core. Yeah. Like, but Idris Elba is saying it a whole different ballgame, right? But anyway,
early on, Eddie calls the muffin balls mushroom muff divers. Seems unnecessary. And then the Gray Dick story at the end when she cuts off his head with this is actually kind of badass, but she cuts off his head with the plate. And then Gray Dick's head flew out through the open door and into the foyer behind him. For a moment longer, Gray Dick's body stood there with its penis pointing at her like an accusing finger. Then the dick shriveled and the dick behind it crashed forward onto a huge roast beef and a mountain of herbed rice. I just love the dick shriveling.
Good,
it's great. I love it. But
I love the dick shrivel and the dick behind it. Like it's
I like that too.
And I loved, but I feel like he used the penis as an accusing finger. I feel like he used that exact phrase in Low Men in Yellow Coats. I could be wrong, but I've heard it before from King.
It does sound very kingy.
Yes.
Anna, did you have the you had mentioned the pissing and the shitting? Did you have that? If not, I can read the shit part.
Yo, go for it. I don't like to read that stuff out loud.
So I'll just read the shit part. Here he's really pissed. Callahan's upper body begins to snap back and forth. Each time it snaps forward, he comes closer to losing his balance and falling on the floor. His hands fly up, his feet fly out. There's a sudden spreading pancake of warmth on his ass, and he realizes he has just shot the chocolate.
Shot the chocolate. I had that.
I feel like whenever I read a King book that has someone shitting themselves, which is most King books, I always learn like a different folksy phrase for it, and I always wonder, like, is that something King made up, or did he grow up saying like, oh, so and so shot the chocolate? It's the same in Dr. Sleep. It's like, oh, Grandpa couldn't hold his fudge. Like it's just this gross like. So yeah, that was this shot of chocolate was very funny.
I bet the King household like has a lot of fun with this stuff. Like when the kids were like growing up, I bet they sat around and made each other laugh and did pull my finger jokes and whatnot.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I love that again because that's like the shit talk.
I
is
just wish he would
endearing.
share it with us.
I know, why not? Yeah, why next time we have him on, we have to like ask him to share all of his shit euphemisms. He's kind of mixing metaphors there. They're like pancake.
We literally talked about shit with him.
You did,
in our interview. So we will do that more. I'm very happy to do that.
Why not? He goes back to that as it were.
Speaking of
that brown well,
Eddie talks about his hard little parcels of rabbit
chocolate
turds.
Fountain.
Hard little parcels of rabbit turds.
Yeah, I love that.
I like that. Yeah.
Oh man.
Okay. Okay. Any more pound cake?
No, not as much as I thought. I feel like I remembered there being more in this book. There's definitely some in. There's some good pound cake in 6 and 7 coming up. So
I think Shot the Chocolate like has the weight of like 4 pound cakes. So I love that. And
he has a pancake in that sentence too. So you get
pancake is good. Okay. let's go to King's Dominion and walk off those calories.
There's another world out there.
I know there is.
Okay, here in King's Dominion, we talk about the connection to other King works. Obviously, this book
all
is
of them
heavily indebted to them. We're not going to talk about everything because that would take all day. But I've got a few interesting ones here that I want to point out. The first is one that I didn't catch, but I read online because King references an earlier uncollected short story from the late 1980s. I haven't read this one yet. We should do it on the archives.
Wait, he references his own uncollected short story?
Yes, The Reploids. Or Reploids. Has anyone here read that
Not
one?
read it.
No.
Yeah, we'll find it and do it on the archives in our Patreon, patreon.com/thebarons, which it deals with people sliding between realities and also features denominations of money featuring President Chadbourne. So when Callahan is kind of sliding through realities and his the faces on his bills are changing, that's King just throwing in a little reference to that story. I've got a handful, but what else do you guys have?
I mean, he test drives the entire plot of the JFK book.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes, he does. I have that written down. Yeah.
And I know I knocked on the JFK obsession before, but I mean, 1122 is my favorite Latter-day King book, I think so.
It's so good. Yeah, I'll read that section really quick. I've got it right here. Callahan says, there's always been the question as to... Oh, wait, he goes... Oh, yeah, he was a gunslinger is right at that section.
Yeah.
But Callahan talks about, there's always been a question as to whether the man who killed him acted alone or whether he was part of a larger conspiracy. And sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and think, why don't you go and see? Why don't you stand in front of that door with the box in your arms and think, Dallas, November 22nd, 1963. Because if you do that, the door will open and you can go there, just like the man in Mr. Wells' story of the time machine. And perhaps you could change what happened that day. If there ever was a watershed moment in American life, that was it. Change that. Change everything that came after. Vietnam, the race riots, everything. Jesus, Eddie said respectfully. If nothing else, you had to respect the ambition. It was right up there with the peg-legged sea captain chasing the white whale. But Pear, what if you did it and changed things for the worse? So yeah, literally test drive for 11/22/63, which is kind of hilarious. But that's the thing, was he started that book in the 70s, I think. So it's like, and he's referenced that notion of like of Kennedy like in multiple books. So,
and I want to say I don't think it's that ambitious. I mean, ambitious, because I had this discussion recently with somebody. What if you could change one thing in American history? What would it be? And it would be like to have Reconstruction actually last. That's fine. At least. Like to not have Reconstruction repealed. I think that would be maybe just stop the Lincoln assassination. That would be ambitious.
Yeah, I agree.
Be
with
like
that.
no internet pop-ups.
I'm just saying. Yeah.
What else?
I have a couple. I have
let's hear
4, and one of them there's 2 regulators. Because they refer to the low man in the Cantoy as regulators. In the previous book, they refer to the big coffin hunter as regulators. But in the regulators, when Audrey is hiding from Tak, the place she goes to is Dogen, which is kind of similar.
That's good.
Like the mental sort of. I almost picture like from Get Out, like the sunken place.
Yeah.
One other one was in Lacey's story. They mentioned East Stoneham, which is like a city in Maine. And they mentioned it in this book just offhand.
Right. That's where the Calvin Tower's hiding.
Yeah. And then the final one is the from Everything's Eventual, that Dinky Earnshaw. He actually kills Skipper Brannigan, who is...
I knew I recognized that name.
Yeah. And it's Henry Dean, Eddie's older brother, was friends with the guy. And they just mentioned that he was kind of a bully. But I think it's funny that he eventually does get killed in Everything's Eventual.
That's so funny. I knew I recognized that name, and I figured it was just from Drawing of the Three or something, but that's great. Dan, any others from you?
This is definitely a stretch, but the Dogen reminded me of Heck Drogan, Whitney Morgan, all those names on the stand. Someone, one of our listeners brought that up on Twitter the other day. They just wrote like those names. Like I think about this every day. I do too. I think it's so funny. There was, hey, this is a stretch, more room 237, because there are other robots later on named after existing King characters. Is Andy named after Andy Dufresne's? Who knows?
Gotta be.
Hey, right? He's a robot. He's kind of a keeper of records. Like
he's imprisoned in all that metal.
Yeah, obviously, it almost gets tough as we get into these later Dark Tower books, because like technically
everything is a reference.
You had King. King is an author.
Father Callahan. Well, there's a character named Father Callahan.
Exactly.
In
It's like book.
I didn't make that connection.
Salem's Lot.
At the end, they find the book Salem's Lot.
It's gonna be funny because I feel like as we go on, if we want to be really lazy, or if like we're having a the night's going long, it can just be like, well, King's Dominion, King's a character. He's written all his books. Everything's included. Moving on. Yeah, everything all at once.
A few others I have. Okay, well, there's mention. Beryl Evans is the one who wrote Charlie the Choo Choo, but then when they're in New York, they see that it was actually like the name has changed and it's Claudia Inez Bachman, which I remember being so struck by because I was like into the Bachman. I think I had read the Bachman books like recently, and I knew the whole like Bachman's fake wife was Claudia Inez Bachman, and I'm like, I thought he was going to somehow tie like Bachman into this, and it ended up just kind of being a one-off reference, or at least that's what I remember. So I remember being disappointed that not more was done with that. Multiple mentions.
He might have had plans to do that, and then just one of the many things that just couldn't quite make it onto the table.
Maybe there is something in the last two books. I just don't remember it. But multiple mentions of blue chambray shirts. Always got to drop those in this section. And on 567, Jake balls his hand so tight that nails bite into his palms and draw blood. That is, I swear, in like 80% of King books. And then we do get to see Ben Mears' funeral, which is interesting.
Oh yeah, I was
Callahan
by that.
Yeah, he travels and we get to find
Wait,
out.
did they say how he died?
No, they just
because it's kind of young, right?
59.
Well, it was the 90s.
Yeah.
So he lived like 20 years after.
I think they say he's 59. I thought they were going to say he was killed by vampires, or I was actually surprised because we always talk about King usually doesn't leave much to mystery, which is fine. I like that about his writing. I was surprised they didn't say how exactly he died, whether it was like heart disease or vampires or Cujo. Maybe Cujo got him.
It was Cuj. I think
down in
Cuj
Mexico.
got him. On page 221, Eddie remembers being young, and where is it? It's like that. I don't shut up. I grow up, and when I look at you, I throw up. He remembers that old rhyme, which is something they say in Stand By Me. I don't remember if it's in the body, but I know it's in the movie. So, and King loves the movie. Any others? I think that's all I have. What about you guys? Anything else?
I have one that's just sort of maybe more should have been in thematic, but maybe worth mentioning since this is where you mentioned all the stuff that kind of struck us.
Yes.
Is Eddie wanting to hear Father Callahan use like current slang terms?
Mm-hmm.
Reminded me of the water going to the well for the words in Lacey's story.
Yeah.
Like the idea of that shared well that we have and the shared language that can resonate.
That's a really interesting one. And I actually really love that scene where it was just like, oh, we come from a similar time. Like there is a hominess to like just general speech patterns. Cool. All right.
Last one. They've got a hell of a band. They mention John Lennon still being alive and just about to die. So gotta throw that out.
Love it. Okay. Let's share our final thoughts in a section we call Final Thoughts.
Dad, can we go now?
You ready?
Yeah, we've been ready for an hour.
Okay, I'll be right there.
You said that a half hour ago. Yeah, my dad's weird. He gets like that when he's writing.
Here in Final Thoughts, we give the book a ranking of bright red Pennywise clown noses, and let's kick it off with Dan Caffrey.
Man, I'm so torn back and forth. I want to go I almost want to go 4.5 because plotting wise, there's not much I would change about this book, but certain elements of the plot go on too long. Like the New York, and I'm a fast reader, and I got done time and everything, but there was a briskness missing from this book that was around when I first read it, and so I'm gonna chalk those early feelings of briskness up to the hype and up to wanting a new Dark Tower book. And now that I've had some time to sit with it, I love the adventure aspects of it. I love how much of a Western it is. Honestly, it's almost the Dark Tower-ness of it all. The repeated 19s, the going to New York, which are all necessary things, but it's just lopped on a little thick for my liking, I think. So I'm gonna give this 4 bright red Pennywise clown noses. I'm a generous grader, so like me going to 4 feels like I'm docking it, even though that's still a very good grade. But that's how I roll. 4 bright red Pennywise clown
Who's your
noses.
MVP?
It's gotta be Callahan. And a weird abortion discourse aside, once again, it's easy to forget how much of a game changer that was back then, and it still felt surprising to me. I've loved going back to Salem's Lot. I loved seeing what he was up to since then. He's not the first character I would think of to pop up in a Dark Tower book, even though King at this point was starting to play with that a little bit, right? With other characters appearing here and there. But if someone was going to say, oh, there's going to be a prominent character from an early King novel and they're going to pop up in this new Dark Tower book in a big way, I almost would have been more inclined to say Charlie McGee or someone, I think, after reading Hearts of Atlantis. I think it's such a cool move to bring in Callahan, and I feel like it really works. And I think nowadays King goes a little too far with the connection sometimes, but this is the early onset of that, so it still feels fresh to me. So Callahan's definitely my MVP.
Anna, noses.
This ditto, I guess. I would give it 4 bright red Pennywise clown noses, and have to say, yeah, Callahan and Andy are the two that I would name.
Yes,
and I sort of actually am not really joking about Andy. I think it's sort of he's kind of tragic.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah, like it's sort of. I mean, I'm evil C-3PO, and you can make jokes. And why didn't everybody see that he was a bad guy? I'm glad that he's in there.
Yeah,
maybe not MVP, but
I love the line when he says, like,
I'm glad that he's in there.
He's like, I'm shutting down, like, I am blind and I am shutting down, like the way it's phrased. It's like, it is kind of sad.
Yeah.
Pfleegor.
But for real, Callahan Callahan's whole story is great. And I would read The Adventures of Father Callahan,
serialized novels. Yep.
Pfleegor. Solving crimes, killing vampires,
taking names, kicking ass,
rescuing babies.
Yeah. With this one, so the books leading up to this, like, when they meet Roland, there's like an initial shock of like, oh, what is this guy? And then they get to know him a little bit, and then you hear a backstory, and this is the first time that they sort of get to see him as a gunslinger doing things beyond just planning and shooting. So when he does like the dance for the people, Eddie is like, wow, this guy really is like kind of trained in this weird diplomacy. It's like what you would imagine like a knight would be in our world, where he's more than just, he's very cunning, but he's also understands how to get on people's level, how to use his, the fearsome reputation, or how to be nice and clever. So I think that's kind of cool, and how everyone now we have unified, and now we're ready to move on to the tower. It did drag a little, like kind of what Caffrey was saying too. It wasn't as quick as the first time I read it, just because I did know what to expect. I do think books 2 through 5 are very solid. Like, that's a great run. It does start to drop off for me a little bit. Until the Wind Through the Keyhole, which I actually really like. But for those reasons, I got to give it 4 bright red Pennywise clown noses, and obviously Callahan, but I'm going to go Andy as well, just because I've always wanted a talking robot, and especially like a sarcastic robot just is really funny to me, because obviously like Bender came out later, and so the idea of a robot coming home and like cracking an oil can and just being like, God, rat races today, that kind of thing.
I thought you were going to say, like, I've never seen a talking robot. And to be honest with you, I've always wanted to see a talking robot. Billy Madison style.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Pfleegor. We see so many sides of Roland specifically in this book that we don't see in the others, and I think a lot of that, like, the community aspect has a lot to do with it, because like when the last time we really saw them in a city, it was in Lud, or at least a populated city, and that's like this blown out city where there's all this danger around every corner, and but here we get actual like hospitality. Like, we see the way Roland and his ka-tet like engage with a community and integrate themselves into a community. We see some of that with young Roland in Wizard and Glass, but that's young Roland. This is really about this ka-tet, and I think seeing them comfortable in a way for once, and well, not necessarily, but like almost there, like as a complete unit, accomplishing a task for someone else that doesn't directly benefit them or bring them closer to the tower. I think all that stuff provides a lot of much needed character development and world building that's really effective. I still think I still think that sometimes there's too much emphasis placed in the wrong areas. I think sometimes the building out of the actual Calla, Bryn Sturgis townspeople sometimes falls a bit flat for me. And the Mia stuff just never quite gels for me. It feels like a half-baked idea that is, you know, being integrated because it's going to be explored much more intensely in the next book. So, you know, and then obviously the Calvin Tower and New York stuff just feels laborious and kind of overwrought. But, you know, a lot of it still really works. And there's a lot of really beautiful stuff in here. And I do love spending time with these characters. So 4 Bright Red Pennywise Clown, this is for me. I'm also a generous creator, Dan. Yeah. Okay. And then my MVP is Andy the Robot because I love him. And Callahan's great too. But I gotta love Andy. Okay, we did it. That was awesome. Wolves of the Calla is in the books. Next month, it's Song of Susanna. December, The Dark Tower. Song of Susanna, blissfully shorter than Wolves of the Calla. So we get a little bit of a break next month. And also, if you are not part of our Patreon, the Dans do the Dark Tower Detour. And that is where we dig into sort of the nitty gritty of the Dark Tower universe. And we've got an episode coming later this month. So please join our Patreon, patreon.com/thebarons. Anna, do you want to plug anything?
Sure. I write a column about sobriety for New York Magazine. It's, I think, new-ish. I don't know if I mentioned it on this show, but since I talked about sobriety a bunch in this episode, people might be interested in that. And then I have a genre podcast myself that isn't under the umbrella of the Losers Club, unfortunately, but is on Patreon at patreon.com/spacethenation. It is a podcast about science fiction and politics that I do with Dan Dresner, who's an IR professor. And it's much more fun than it sounds. I should stop saying that. I need to stop saying that. It sounds awesome.
Great,
it's hilarious.
Great marketing on it. No
we just did an episode about Asimov and Foundation, and that book sucks, and Asimov sucks. And
I've never read it.
Don't.
He's kind of like is he like kind of fascist? I don't really know his work very well.
He's not fascist. He's just a horrible person. Like. I'm not kidding. Like,
no, I believe you.
The cover art of the episode is a picture someone took of him basically like aggressively hugging a woman who's looking at the camera like that. Like he was known to like grab women's tits and asses at sci-fi conferences. And he's one of the reasons why the genres can be so toxic and fandom of it can be so toxic is that he's one of the people that made sci-fi conventions terrible.
Well, you know, if you're famous enough, you can just grab him by the pussy.
God.
Yes. So, apparently, Asimov was an early believer. Actually, what he did say is that someone told him, you got to stop that. And he said, yes, every once in a while you do get slapped, but you also get laid.
Oh, Jesus. Wow. What if King had Trump in this book saying that to like Eddie?
I'd love it.
Listen, Eddie.
Dan Caffrey, what is coming up on Halloweenies?
Oh man, I think we are finishing up our biggest month of the year. Obviously, we have our review of the very polarizing Halloween Ends, which I loved. Pfleegor and I were just talking about it. Anna and Randall, have you seen Halloween Ends yet?
Not yet.
I'd be curious. It's a very polarizing horror movie, which I love. I love
Jamie Lee Curtis, sober.
Yeah, I think this is her best performance in this new trilogy. Like I think what they did with her character works really well, and she's just bringing her A game. I don't know, I thought it was great. I love the movie, but also love that it's divisive. I feel like we don't have enough contrasting horror opinions sometimes, not sometimes, all the time on social media. So yeah, you can listen to that episode. So if you're on Patreon and you're listening to this, or I guess the regular feed too, because
it'll hit that later.
There's something that should happen on Thursday with Halloweenies commentary we're doing that should be really cool. If it has happened, you'll know it, and if it doesn't, then just ignore this. But if it does happen, it will be out by the time you're listening to this. So
all right, check the Halloweenies account.
Yeah, check the feed. Yeah, good stuff.
Pfleegor, where can people find you?
Just my name on social media. Check out Dark Tower Detour. Yeah.
Dark Tower.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and then let's talk about with Dark Tower Detour. Got a new one coming out this month. And I'll be at the Hot D finale in my living room watching House of the Dragon this Sunday. So see you there.
Cool. And then, Stay tuned. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up on Losers Club, but we are pretty firmly focused on the Dark Tower these days. So catch up on your reading. There's a lot to do. And yeah, let's sign off. Long days and pleasant
night.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you know you want somebody to treat you good.
This is the end of our show. For now. We hope you enjoyed this production. If you like our programming, consider searching for other bloody disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.